Chapter 174. On New Year's Eve, Poplar Fruit made too many phone calls, and he acted very secretive. His mother, Su Jinfeng, became suspicious, and as a result, Poplar Fruit was very depressed for the entire spring festival. Su Jinfeng spent every day thinking about how to ask about Poplar Fruit's relationship situation. Poplar Fruit answered truthfully that there was no progress, but she didn't believe him. She kept asking Poplar Fruit until he was annoyed. Unable to get the answer she wanted, Su Jinfeng started to conspire with other relatives, aunts, to find a way to introduce a local girl to Poplar Fruit for a blind date. Although Poplar Fruit had a child at a young age, he was still rich, and he was quite good-looking. After some discussion, they found that there were quite a few suitable girls. There was no way he could celebrate the spring festival. Poplar Fruit realized that a large number of blind dates were about to come, so he quickly used work as an excuse and ran away with Kiki. He didn't dare to stay in his hometown any longer, and he didn't even celebrate the Lantern Festival at home. The holidays in China were very strange. There was no holiday on New Year's Eve, no holiday on the Lantern Festival, and no holiday on the Spring Festival. Therefore, Song Jiwen and Duan Xueqing came back to work very early. When Song Jiwen saw Poplar Fruit come back, he was jealous, so he extorted a lot of local products from him before he gave up. For Poplar Fruit, as long as there was work, his work would continue all the time. However, because of Fong Beibei's visit last time, Poplar Fruit found the balance between Chinese and Swedish, which greatly improved the quality and efficiency of his translation. 3 days before the submission of the manuscript, Poplar Fruit finished translating this masterpiece, which was a fusion of fantasy and reality. After another day of self-revision, Poplar Fruit finally finished his work. As for his translation, Poplar Fruit could only praise himself and praise himself. Poplar Fruit did not know how good the other translators in the country were, but he was still quite satisfied with his translation. Of course, he still had no idea if his translation would be accepted by the Nobel Prize in Literature Committee. He had tried his best. Whether or not he succeeded would depend on other people's choice. On the day before the Lantern Festival, Poplar Fruit received another piece of good news. His results for the postgraduate entrance examination were out. Out of 500 points, Poplar Fruit scored 467 points. 2 foreign languages and French had a total score of 100 points. Poplar Fruit scored 99 points, infinitely close to full marks. For the 2 professional subjects, full marks were 150 points. Poplar Fruit scored 146 points for comprehensive English and 144 points for linguistics. Poplar Fruit felt that the objective multiple-choice questions should be all correct. He did not know if it was because of the essay, translation, and some other subjective questions that had some points deducted. However, these were not a problem. The only subject that was slightly worse was politics. Poplar Fruit scored 78 points out of 100 points. Poplar Fruit was fully prepared for this subject's results. After all, the politics questions this time were too strange and unpopular. He had 2 subjective questions that were completely blank. For him to score 78 points, it was not too bad. Poplar Fruit had seen other people's opinions on the internet. Their politics exams were not any better. Maybe they had written a few more words, and the teacher had given them some sympathy points. Their total score was about the same as his. However, Poplar Fruit's total score was indeed very heaven-defying. According to previous year's scores for the semifinals, Poplar Fruit's score had exceeded the minimum score by more than 100 points. He would definitely be able to enter the semifinals. After Song Jiwen received the news, he shouted, "Great news! We must celebrate!" Poplar Fruit discussed with him. Since it was the Lantern Festival tomorrow, and Song Jiwen was not going home, they might as well eat hot pot together. Once this suggestion was made, Song Jiwen immediately agreed. As a foodie, he even made a huge list and urged Poplar Fruit to buy them the next day. It was too boring for the 2 of them to eat hot pot. Poplar Fruit thought about it and called Duan Xueqing to eat together. Duan Xueqing naturally had no problem. After she got off work, she would come directly to Poplar Fruit's place. Poplar Fruit had nothing to do at home. Early in the morning, he began to prepare the ingredients for the hot pot. Song Jiwen's list was all meat. Poplar Fruit directly threw it away. There was no point in using it as a reference. Mutton was too fishy. If they only ate mutton hot pot, it would be fine. If they added other dishes, the fishy smell would ruin the whole pot of soup. Chicken was not good either. If it was cooked in the hot pot for too short a time, it would not be cooked well. If it was cooked for too long, it would be too tough and not delicious. Of course, chicken wings were still okay. Poplar Fruit bought some. Beef was the best choice for hot pot. Poplar Fruit directly went to the supermarket and bought a big bag of beef. It weighed 2 pounds and was enough for 3 people to eat. Poplar Fruit also bought a lot of pork tripe, pork offal, fish balls, meatballs, and quail eggs. Duan Shueching probably would not eat too much meat. She would probably like pork tripe, meatballs, and quail eggs with less fat. Living in the coastal area, seafood was indispensable. Poplar Fruit specially bought fresh prawns, squid, and crispy anchovies. They were all fresh. He bought them and prepared them himself. For example, the crispy anchovies were cut into thin slices. They could be eaten after being dipped in the hot pot. The texture was fresh and crisp. The meat was firm and juicy. Just thinking about it made him drool. Other side dishes like spinach, cabbage, potatoes, lotus roots, tofu skin, shiitake, enoki mushrooms, etc. Poplar Fruit bought some of them. They might not be able to finish them, but there were many types. As long as they were happy, it would be fine. When Song Jiwen and Duan Shueching came back from work one after another, Poplar Fruit put the hot pot on the induction cooker. They did not eat spicy food. The bottom of the pot was actually clear soup. The reason why Poplar Fruit separated was to take care of Duan Shueching. He cooked the meat on one side and vegetables on the other. That way, Duan Shueching would not be too sick of the food she ate. Song Jiwen did not even change his clothes. He took off his coat and rolled up his sleeves. He sat at the dining table and opened a beer and soda. He shouted, "I'm starving. I'm starving. Fruit, hurry up and eat." Coming, coming. Poplar Fruit laughed. He put the last few side dishes on the table and sat down. "I want to eat meat first," Song Jiwen shouted as he picked up a large piece of beef with his chopsticks and threw it into the steaming hot pot. "What sauce do you want? Make it yourself?" Poplar Fruit called out to Duan Shueching. He opened a bottle of cha-cha sauce and poured some into his plate. Then he added some soy sauce. "Give me some peanut butter." Song Jiwen was busy putting meat and vegetables into the hot pot. His hands were busy, so he could only turn his head and say this to Poplar Fruit. "I don't have time for you. Do it yourself. There's plenty to eat." Poplar Fruit laughed. He was not in a hurry to eat. Instead, he fed Kiki red date millet porridge. Recently, Kiki had also started to reduce her breastfeeding and gradually eat more staple foods. Otherwise, if she only relied on milk powder, her nutrition would not be able to keep up. Chi-Chi was sitting on a high, exclusive seat, eating millet porridge that was only faintly sweet, but her eyes were staring straight at the meat slices and meatballs that were rolling up and down. The fragrance of the hot pot had long since permeated the entire house. Who knew if Chi-Chi was quenching her thirst at the sight of plums? Come, come, come. Song Jiwen put the cooked meat into his bowl. He was not as impatient as he was at the beginning. He stood up with a can of beer and said with a smile, "Shueching, let's toast to Poplar Fruit and congratulate him on his success in the first round of the postgraduate entrance exam." Poplar Fruit quickly stood up with Duan Shueching. He held a glass of Sprite and said with a smile, "No, everything has just begun. It's still far from success." After clinking glasses with them, Song Jiwen smiled and said, "It's not far. You've exceeded the cutoff score by so much. Unless those teachers are blind, they won't abandon you." "Ah, I'll take your blessings," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "However, we're just eating hot pot. Don't make it so serious. Hurry up and eat. Don't wait for me. I'll take care of the little ancestor first." Although she could not speak coherently, Kiki could vaguely understand that Poplar Fruit was talking about her. She immediately pouted and shouted while slapping the chair, "Bad, bad. Okay. Daddy was wrong. Daddy was wrong." Poplar Fruit quickly apologized. Kiki reluctantly changed her mood and continued to eat the millet porridge. Drinking ice soda or beer and eating hot pot in winter was really a heavenly enjoyment. After Poplar Fruit finished feeding Kiki, He quickly picked up the meat that Song Jiwin cooked in the hot pot and ate it heartily. Song Jiwin was not angry. He drank a mouthful of beer and added 2 chicken wings. He said, "Fruit, I think these chicken wings are better for barbecue." Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and scolded with a smile. "If you want a barbecue, you need a place. In an apartment building like ours, it's better to eat hot pot obediently. Then hurry up and buy a house." Song Jiwin said matter-of-factly as he ate the meat. "If we buy a villa, we can eat barbecue and sing karaoke on the roof." "Damn, why don't you say that you should hurry up and buy a house? You're the rich one, okay?" Poplar Fruit was speechless. Duan Shuiching sat on the right side of Poplar Fruit and gently took a sip of soda. She smiled as she watched the 2 brothers bicker. "That's my dad's money. I'm a poor person." Song Jiwin waved his hand and said, "Am I like you? You're a translator and model, earning so much money that your hands go soft. Do you dare to say that the foreign old man didn't give you a few $100,000 last time? What's the use of a few $100,000? It's not like you don't know the price of housing in Guangzhou." Poplar Fruit said as his mouth did not stop. He picked up a meatball and threw it into his mouth. With a bite, the scalding juice flowed out. His tongue that had just been frozen by the soda immediately felt like ice and fire. "Don't talk about buying a villa. For an ordinary commercial building like ours, a few $100,000 is only enough for the down payment." Poplar Fruit said, "Work hard to earn money. Buying a house is a long journey." Song Jiwin laughed. "But you are doing so well, and I am suffering." "What's wrong? Godmother is scolding you again?" Poplar Fruit laughed. Song Jiwin replied gloomily, "That's right. She is always using you as a role model and scolding me." "What? You are going to be a deputy section chief soon, and Godmother is still not satisfied?" Poplar Fruit shook his head and said. Duan Shuiching interrupted in shock. "Wow, Brother Mosquito, you are a deputy section chief now?" Song Jiwin was sweating profusely. "You are the one who was in the gynecology department." "Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 175. After eating and drinking their fill, Duan Shuiching was sent to the living room by Poplar Fruit to take care of Kiki. Song Jiwin went to the balcony to pick his teeth like a young master, while Poplar Fruit cleaned up the mess by himself. However, the advantage of a large hot pot was that it was convenient and easy to clean up. The leftovers were thrown into the trash bag and thrown away later. The rest could be washed with detergent. "Fruit, Shuiching, come and see the fireworks." Poplar Fruit heard Song Jiwin shouting from the balcony just as he came out of the kitchen. It was like the scene in Stephen Chow's movie where Uncle the shouted wife, "Come out and see God." Poplar Fruit walked over and then turned back. He wrapped Kiki in a blanket and came to the balcony together. Yongguo's balcony was facing the direction of Huaqing Square. At this moment, the night sky was shrouded in fireworks. Meteors rose into the sky one after another and then exploded like a flower bud blooming in an instant. Even though it was a flash in the pan, it still left behind a gorgeous beauty. "Oh, oh, oh!" Song Jiwin shouted excitedly. He wasn't alone. The entire neighborhood was filled with whistles and cheers. Yangcheng had banned fireworks for so many years, so it had been a long time since everyone had seen such a beautiful scene. Poplar Fruit discovered that Kiki was also entranced. Her eyes were wide open, and her mouth couldn't help but open. Poplar Fruit quickly closed her mouth. The wind was blowing on the balcony, so it was easy to breathe in the cold air with your mouth open. It wouldn't be fun if you had a stomachache. "Happy Chinese New Year!" Song Jiwin shouted. Hearing this, Kiki's eyes lit up. She shouted in a clear voice, "Give me the red packet." Her words weren't very clear, but they were very loud, making everyone laugh. "It's another year." Song Jiwin always liked to sigh. Although it was just a few words, Duan Shuiching also responded, "Yes, there have been so many changes in the past year. Even Shuiching has graduated and worked for so long." Poplar Fruit sighed. Song Jiwin tiptoed, hooked Poplar Fruit's neck and said fiercely, "If we're talking about changes, the one who changed the most is you." Duan Shuiching nodded vigorously at the side. Song Ji-win let go of the poplar fruit and counted the changes in the poplar fruit over the past year. First of all, I had a child, Song Ji-win said. I brought a child back for no reason and angered my ex-girlfriend so much that she left. I told you at the time, with a child, you definitely can't keep your ex-girlfriend. Thinking of poplar fruit's ex-girlfriend of 4 years, Duan Xueqing felt a little stifled. She secretly glanced at the poplar fruit and saw that the poplar fruit was still smiling without any ill feelings. Her heart brightened up a little. Look, now Kiki can crawl all over the ground. Look at you, because of Kiki, you gave up the entire forest. Sigh. Song Ji-win pretended to sigh in disappointment. Then you even resigned. Your previous job was clearly very promising, but in order to take care of your child, you actually resigned and squatted at home. Song Ji-win said, you don't know how many times my mother sighed at home because of you. In our profession, how many people can be like you, working for a year and their salary rising to more than 10,000 yuan? Poplar fruit corrected, it's not salary, it's salary plus commission. More or less. Anyway, the income is very high. But you still gave up, Song Ji-win said. After that, you stayed at home and squatted at home. You even made a name for yourself by squatting at home. Song Ji-win laughed and said, you can make a name for yourself by being a translator. Not to mention publishing books, you also appeared in the newspapers so many times. Even the leaders in our unit didn't appear in the newspapers as much as you. I thought you were living the life of a big star from then on and gradually drifted away. But in the end, you avoided the media and continued to squat at home all day. Song Ji-win sighed and said, drifting away my ass. Poplar fruit laughed and slapped his head, saying, no matter how I develop, we will always be good friends, okay? Okay. Song Ji-win hid from poplar fruit and said, you are the big guy. You have the final say. But do you know what I hate the most about you? Song Ji-win hid behind Duan Xueqing. Duan Xueqing was stunned for a moment. She and poplar fruit looked at Song Ji-win in confusion. Song Ji-win continued, it's you who want to take the postgraduate entrance exam again. A young man with a bright future actually went back to being reborn. Sigh. He sighed 3 times in a row, which made Duan Xueqing laugh. Poplar fruit was not to be outdone. He said, you're not bad either. You've changed so much in the past year. You used to bring women home all day long. Now, how many months have you not touched a woman? How many months have you not been to a bar? I was regrouping and waiting for an opportunity to come back. Song Ji-win stiffened his neck and refused to admit it. Come on, you have turned over a new leaf. You don't flirt with women and work hard. If not, how can you be promoted to deputy section chief? Poplar fruit laughed. We have talked so much, and Xueqing still has not talked about herself. Xueqing, tell me, are there any changes? Song Ji-win changed the topic and looked at Duan Xueqing, who was covering her mouth and laughing. Duan Xueqing did not know and thought that Feng Yu was really asking her. She hurriedly said, me? Nothing has changed, right? Why are you asking if there are any changes? Song Ji-win laughed. No. My previous leader was transferred to the Water Conservancy Bureau. Duan Xueqing said, that's other people's change. What has it got to do with you? Song Ji-win said speechlessly. But being transferred to the Water Conservancy Bureau should be a demotion. How is the new leader? Poplar fruit asked with concern. I don't know. Duan Xueqing replied weakly. Duan Xueqing always does her own work and is not like others who like to gossip about their leaders. After chatting for a while, Song Ji-win suggested, with the weather in Guangzhou, it's impossible to watch shooting stars. But since the fireworks are so beautiful, let's make a wish. Okay. Duan Xueqing looked at the sky and closed her eyes. Poplar fruit smiled and closed his eyes to make a wish. Fruit, what wish did you make? Song Ji-win opened his eyes and asked. Duan Xueqing also looked at poplar fruit. Poplar fruit laughed. Me? I hope that Kiki can grow up quickly. I also hope that all my family and friends will be healthy and happy in the new year. You're too serious. Song Ji-win shouted. Mosquito, what about you? Poplar fruit asked. Promotion, wealth, marriage. Song Ji-win's wish was simple and clear. It was completely in the style of Song Ji-won, not being serious at all. Xueqing, what about you? Poplar Fruit asked. I'm not telling you. Duan Xueqing cutely stuck out her tongue. Sure. Song Ji-won said with disdain. That's not fair, say it. I won't say it, hee. Duan Xueqing was not scared by him. She looked at Poplar Fruit and the others, and finally her eyes fell on Poplar Fruit. Against the backdrop of the dazzling fireworks in the sky, her beautiful eyes seemed to sparkle with brilliance. Chapter 176. Fong Beibei had returned to class, so Poplar Fruit brought Kiki to find her and bring Gold home. However, before leaving, Poplar Fruit received a phone call. The person on the other end of the phone said that it was Huang Shuiyu. Poplar Fruit was familiar with this name and voice. This was because he was the head of the English department in Poplar Fruit's university. He was also a doctoral supervisor. When Poplar Fruit was in his third year of university, he was Poplar Fruit's linguistics teacher. Huang Shuiyu was not looking for Poplar Fruit himself. He only told Poplar Fruit that the dean, Chen Zhongdai, wanted to meet him at the dean's office. Since he was going to school today, Poplar Fruit agreed to meet with the dean this morning. Poplar Fruit had long admired the dean, Chen Zhongdai. He was a world-class linguist. Not only was he second to none in the country, but he was also a committee member of the World Functional Linguistics Research Association. Unfortunately, in the 4 years of university, the dean only appeared at the opening ceremony and graduation ceremony. Poplar Fruit had never attended any of his classes. After all, at that time, Yanghua basically skipped all the classes that he could. It was impossible to expect him to sit in on a PhD student's class. However, wasn't he learning more and more profound now? While he was constantly learning different languages, he would also study various linguistics and translation theories in depth. Among them, functional linguistics was a great help to translation. Poplar Fruit studied it very seriously for a long time. Other than the foreign experts, what Poplar Fruit read the most was the dean's thesis and research results. He did not completely agree, but he definitely benefited a lot. For example, the dean's 2003 paper from the Tianjin Sha, the English translation of Chiosi, The Importance of Formal Equivalents, gave Yang Guo a lot of inspiration on translating ancient Chinese poetry. Poplar Fruit was puzzled as to why the dean, Chen Zhongdai, looked for him. The dean did not teach graduate students. Otherwise, Poplar Fruit would not have ignored the dean when he was considering a supervisor. No matter why the dean looked for him, Poplar Fruit still had to prepare. After all, the dean was his idol. Poplar Fruit also liked to listen to music and watch movies. He liked some of the celebrities. However, most of his idols were from the academic world. Song Ji-won could not understand this world of top students. It was not appropriate to bring Kiki over. Poplar Fruit first went to Fong Beibei's dormitory and entrusted Kiki to Fong Beibei. Then, Fong Beibei held Kiki's little hand and cheered for him with clenched fists. With a smile on his face, he walked to the red-walled building where the school was located. On the way, Poplar Fruit also met Mao Yanan, who was also an assistant counselor after her master's degree. He had not seen her for more than a year, and she looked much more capable. Of course, she had also put on a lot of weight. Yanan! She did not recognize Poplar Fruit. It was Poplar Fruit who greeted her first. Hearing the voice, Mao Yanan recognized Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit? Why are you here? I have something to discuss with the dean today. Poplar Fruit said simply. Wow! You even want to meet with the dean? A while ago, I heard from old Luo that you were doing very well as a translator. You even published a book. Your future is bright. Mao Yanan smiled. No. Poplar Fruit smiled modestly. Okay, since you have something to discuss with the dean, I won't hold you back. Let's get together when we have time. Mao Yanan smiled. Okay. Waving goodbye to Mao Yanan, Poplar Fruit looked at her back as she turned and left in a hurry. He could not help but sigh at the good fortune of time. The fat girl who was shy when she spoke and did things was now a capable person in the student work office. Looking at it, the possibility of her staying at the school after graduation was not small. The dean's office was on the 5th floor. Poplar Fruit took the elevator to go up. The school building was quite old. Even the elevator felt quite old. However, it still steadily sent Poplar Fruit up. Looking at the time on his phone, there was still 15 minutes until the appointed time, but he could still go in. Poplar Fruit turned his phone to silent and knocked on the dean's door. The dean looked like a very knowledgeable person. He was in his 50s or 60s, but he was still full of energy. He was wearing a gray suit, but he was very straightforward when he spoke and walked. When Poplar Fruit came in, he immediately walked up from behind his desk and smiled as he shook hands with Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit did not expect this move. Holding the dean's hand, he was stunned and flattered for a moment. He sat down and did not know where to put his hands and feet. "Don't be shy. I'm not a big tiger." "Huh?" Chun Zongdai laughed heartily. He did not return to his seat. Instead, he pulled a swivel chair and sat beside Poplar Fruit. "Actually, I've wanted to meet you for a long time," Chun Zongdai said directly. Poplar Fruit had always heard about Dean Chun Zongdai's personality. However, hearing was not as good as seeing. Now, he truly felt the straightforward personality of a northerner. "Is that so?" Poplar Fruit smiled embarrassedly. "Beijing Foreign Studies University's old Luo told me about you last year. At that time, the news even found trouble with our teachers and asked if we would accept you as a special student. At that time, I wanted to look for you. I wanted to see what kind of genius old Luo was talking about." Chun Zongdai said. Poplar Fruit was speechless. Genius? Once in 100 years? Professor Luo Lin was really praising him too much. But at that time, there were a few seminars held in Guangzhou. I was so busy that I forgot about it. If it wasn't for Director Huang showing me the list of this year's graduate students, I wouldn't have remembered. Chun Zongdai laughed. The people old Luo thinks highly of are indeed extraordinary. Your results for the preliminary exam were simply too eye-catching. Chun Zongdai mischievously said. However, you did slightly worse in the politics test, TSK Tisk. Poplar Fruit scratched his head embarrassedly. Let's not talk about those useless things. Do you know why I'm looking for you today? Chun Zongdai asked. Poplar Fruit was puzzled and shook his head. No, Director Huang didn't tell me in detail. Two things, but they have to be done one at a time. The former is the cause of the latter, and the latter is the effect of the former. Chun Zongdai said. Poplar Fruit listened attentively. Let's talk about the first thing first. There are 3 test papers here. You can finish them without a time limit. But the earlier you finish, the earlier we can go eat. Chun Zongdai grabbed 3 pieces of paper from the table, waved it, and said, This is also a small test. So it's a test. Poplar Fruit took the test papers and flipped through them. The first paper was about linguistics. It was half multiple choice and half subjective. The second paper was about French. Poplar Fruit glanced at it. It seemed to be more difficult than the previous ones. Poplar Fruit was surprised when he saw the third paper. It was actually in Swedish. Chun Zongdai proudly said, You didn't expect this, right? Last month, the Department of Education asked us about your situation. That's when I found out that you can speak Swedish. I even went to look for Luo Lin's friend to write the test. After looking at the test papers, Poplar Fruit became more serious. It seemed that the dean was going to test his ability today. Chun Zongdai looked at Poplar Fruit grabbing a gel pen and started writing. He asked with concern, Do you want a dictionary? You can use a dictionary. What kind of joke is this? Is there a dictionary that can be compared to Poplar Fruit's Human Nature Dictionary? Poplar Fruit only shook his head. Do the linguistics test first. I can mark it while waiting. Chun Zongdai instigated. In fact, this test paper that he came up with was the main topic that he wanted to test. Poplar Fruit nodded. However, when he looked at the test paper seriously, Poplar Fruit was stunned. This test paper was very difficult. It was even harder than what Professor Luo Lin asked him during the conference. Not only did the questions involve functional linguistics, but the knowledge of other schools of thought was also very profound. Even though Poplar Fruit was no longer the Poplar Fruit from a few months ago, he still had to spend a lot of time thinking about this test paper. However, even though he was frowning, Poplar Fruit still filled in the test paper. Chun Zongdai, who was watching from the side, became more and more satisfied. He took the test paper with a smile and looked at it seriously. The linguistics test paper was purely theoretical, so it was very difficult. However, The French and Swedish test papers posed no resistance to Poplar Fruit at all. The difficulty of this test paper was only slightly more difficult than the highest level exam in the country. In Poplar Fruit's eyes, it was just a piece of cake. Who had ever seen a foreign Chinese test paper that could stump a Chinese? Poplar Fruit's mastery of other languages was not inferior to a native speaker. It was a multiple-choice question, so before Chen Zhongdai finished marking the first test paper, Poplar Fruit had already finished the other two. So fast, Chen Zhongdai said in surprise. He could only put down the test paper in his hand and scan Poplar Fruit's French and Swedish test papers for the corresponding professor to mark. You're better than I thought. After Chen Zhongdai finished marking the test papers, he put down his pen and smiled happily. Old Luo said you're better than the average graduate student, but he underestimated you. With your level, you can definitely go for a PhD. Poplar Fruit glanced at the test paper marked by the dean and highlighted some areas that were not good enough. Poplar Fruit did not care about Chen Zhongdai's praise. He was more interested in where he went wrong. Chen Zhongdai saw it and explained it to him excitedly. After listening to the dean's explanation, Poplar Fruit finally understood. He finally understood that on the path of academia, even though he had a photographic memory, there was still a big gap between him and the dean, who had been studying the same subject for decades. For these mistakes, on one hand, he did not have enough knowledge. On the other hand, he lacked the ability to connect the dots. But you're already very good. The dean was afraid of hurting Poplar Fruit's feelings, so he comforted him. To be able to reach your level at this age, at least in the country, I haven't seen anyone else. You're still young, so you can learn more. Compared to us old men, you have a bright future ahead of you. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 177. After exchanging some linguistic knowledge with Poplar Fruit, Chen Zhongdai also received feedback about the results of Poplar Fruit's other two papers. Not bad. Chen Zhongdai looked at the results and smiled. 98 points in French and full marks in Swedish. You don't know, but Professor Zhao Xian from Beijing Foreign Studies University asked me to persuade you to go to his graduate school. Poplar Fruit looked at him blankly. Chen Daizong shook his head and said proudly, "How is that possible? Now that you've joined my faculty, you're under my wing. I want to show them that our Dongshan University, a university in Guangdong Province, is capable of nurturing top-notch language talents." Poplar Fruit smiled in agreement. Higashiyama University's language subjects were indeed not competitive enough in the country. For so many years, although there were some powerful people, they still lacked a strong foundation and a strong leader. Poplar Fruit naturally did not think that he would be that strong leader, but it seemed that the dean was very optimistic about him. Chen Zhongdai said, "Well, the first thing is done. Let's talk about the second thing." "The second thing is about your arrangement." Chen Zhongdai smiled and said, "You will definitely be admitted as a graduate student. However, with your level, ordinary graduate courses won't be difficult for you. It's too much of a waste of time for you to study for 3 years. You don't want to sit in class all day and listen to knowledge that you already know, do you?" Yonghua nodded, then shook her head and said, "No, if it's your class, then I'll listen with all my ears." "Don't flatter me. Kid, you graduated 2 years ago, and you are already a wily old fox in society. But there is no need for that here. I have something to talk to you about." Chen Daizong knocked on the table and said, "If I don't go to graduate school, do I go directly to a PhD?" Poplar Fruit asked, puzzled. "In your dreams." Chen Daizong laughed and scolded. "No matter how special it is, it's impossible for you to jump directly from an undergraduate to a doctoral student. My idea is for you to do your master's and PhD in a row." Chen Daizong explained, "You still have to study as a graduate student, but you don't have to go to class. You have to finish all the credits that other students have to study for 3 years within a year, and then you can study with me directly. I'm qualified to be your supervisor, right?" Chen Daizong was joking with Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit hurriedly said, "Of course not. It's my honor that you are willing to be my supervisor." Poplar Fruit was pleasantly surprised by this arrangement. In the past, he had thought that he would go and listen to it when school started. If it was not of much use, he would ask the teacher to apply for not attending classes and only attend the exam. If he couldn't do it, then he would just grit his teeth and endure for 3 years to get his master's certificate. But now, it seemed that happiness had come too suddenly and too violently. Now that he had a postgraduate position, getting a doctorate was no longer a dream. Also, postgraduate students only need to study for 1 year and do not need to attend classes. Of course, there is no free lunch in this world. After throwing out the benefits, Chen Daizong started to talk about the conditions. He smiled and said, "You don't have to do anything this year. You have to study with me. Although you are still a postgraduate student, you still have to follow me to do the doctorate project and learn the content. This is only one of the conditions. I will also arrange for you to be Professor Wang Zhongxin's teaching assistant in the French department. In the first semester, you will be teaching undergraduate students under her guidance and learn how to be a teacher. In the second semester, you will have to teach an elective course independently and teach Swedish." Chen Daizong said. Poplar Fruit was dumbfounded. Be a teacher? Also, be a teacher of French and Swedish? I can't do it, right? Poplar Fruit said weakly. Why not? Chen Daizong asked. You can make those old men in Beijing Foreign Language University shocked. That means you have the ability to do this well. Don't be afraid because you haven't been a teacher before. Professor Wang Zhongxin will guide you. Chen Daizong explained to Yanghua, our school currently only has French, German, Spanish, and a few other popular minor language majors. As long as it's not popular, we won't be able to open it. In the end, it's because we don't have enough foundation. Your Swedish is really excellent. I hope you can bring this major out in the future. It is not as simple as opening an elective course in the university. Do you understand what I mean? He understood a little. The dean wanted to give Poplar Fruit a very heavy responsibility. Although he was not a leader, the hope of opening up new territory was not easy at all. Since he found out that he was very talented in languages, Poplar Fruit had thought about his future. He wanted to be a translator and academic at the same time. On the academic side, he also wanted to be a teacher in a university in the future. However, he thought that this would be a matter of a few years. He did not expect it to happen so quickly. Such a challenging task, I like it. Poplar Fruit thought silently in his heart. He looked into Chen Daizong's eyes and nodded vigorously. What about English? Poplar Fruit asked. I still have to study linguistics, right? Of course. Chen Daizong smiled proudly and said, your future will not be limited to just one language. Linguistics, my functional linguistics, and the theories of other linguistic schools, you have to learn them all. Regardless of whether you're going to develop in my field of functional linguistics or find your own path in the future, I hope that you'll be able to make your voice heard in this field and the world. In the afternoon, after walking out of the school building, Yanghua was still in a trance as he looked back at the floor where the dean's office was located. Today's meeting with the dean was much more rewarding than he could have imagined. It was too dreamy. The dean was very optimistic about him and could not wait. It was so fast that Poplar Fruit did not even have to participate in the postgraduate examination. Everything would be arranged by him. It was so fast that the dean could not wait and asked for his contact information to prepare a book list for Poplar Fruit to start studying before entering the university. It was so fast that the dean even asked him to come to the university every week to listen to Professor Wang Zhongxin's class and learn how to be a teacher. He also wanted to report his learning progress to him. It seemed that after a few days of leisure, Poplar Fruit was going to be busy again. However, Poplar Fruit was still very confident. He believed that even if he took this path, it would not take up much of his usual time. He was so smart. Learning for 5 minutes was equivalent to learning for an hour. Wasn't it just studying and learning how to be a teacher? If he could not even handle this small matter, wouldn't it be a waste of the genius brain that God gave him? After thinking about it, Poplar Fruit smiled and went to find Fong Bei. He was really sorry for making her wait for an entire day. It seemed that he would have to rent a house near the university. Learning how to be a teacher. He would start with Fong Bei. Poplar Fruit laughed in his heart. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than or equal to. Chapter 178. We're all friends. Poplar Fruit waved his hand as he replied casually. Why would a friend of the opposite sex do this? Song Jiwon questioned as he continued. She could have applied for postgraduate studies after graduation, but she didn't go. Instead, she worked so hard to become a civil servant and stayed in Yangcheng City. In Yangcheng City, she doesn't even leave the house. Aside from looking for you, how could she have gone to someone else's house? With Duan Xueqing's personality, I dare to say that she definitely hasn't. But she still came to look for you. Poplar Fruit replied as he continued. Don't you live here as well? Seriously, why did you make it so complicated? Finishing his words, he took out his keys and opened the door. Song Jiwon did not return to his own house and followed him in. Hearing his words, Song Jiwon wished that he could smash him to death with a brick as he replied, Come to look for me? Isn't that an excuse? Think about it. When she came over, how much time did she spend with you? How much time did she spend talking to me? Not to mention anything else, just the way she looked at you, aside from you. Even a fool could tell what she was thinking. Poplar Fruit was a little unsure as he spoke with an unconfident tone. That can't be, right? We're all good friends. Isn't it the same for me and her? And for you and her? Furthermore, I've always treated her as a younger sister. It's not the same. You can figure it out yourself. Song Jiwon spread his hands and said, In terms of looks, you're more handsome than me. In terms of family background, you're better than me. Poplar Fruit couldn't figure it out as he continued. Why would she fall for me? That doesn't make sense, right? I don't know. Song Jiwon recalled as he continued. Anyway, when I first saw Duan Xueqing, I felt that this pure girl was fated to be with you. In the end, it was proven that she did have a special impression of you. I knew that I was right not to make a move. After all, I can't covet my friend's wife. Song Jiwon smiled and said, Otherwise, why do you think I'm not tempted by such a beautiful woman in front of me? I thought you were a rabbit that doesn't eat the grass near its burrow. Poplar Fruit laughed. So, you like Xueqing too? Don't change the topic. Song Jiwon sternly pointed at Poplar Fruit and said, I'm only telling you this because we're brothers. Don't get involved in a bunch of women and it won't be good. A pile of women? What kind of women are there? Poplar Fruit said with a guilty conscience. After I graduated, the number of women I've seen is less than the number of women in my class. What's the name of the girl you worked with in the foreign trade company? She's the pure and lovely girl at the front desk, Song Jiwon asked. Lu Jingyi? Poplar Fruit asked doubtfully. Yes, Lu Jingyi. Song Jiwon said, At that time, I liked that girl at first glance. I asked you for her contact information, but you didn't give it to me and even beat me up. Tell me, isn't that right? And after you resigned, you ran out in the middle of the night to help her solve her problem. Do you dare to say that there's nothing going on between you two? There's nothing going on between us. Poplar Fruit said innocently, but with certainty he said, There's really nothing going on. I haven't seen her in a long time. Then why does she call you every few weeks to report her work? I've already seen her a few times. She's not interested in you. Could it be that you're her boss? Song Jiwon rolled his eyes and said. Poplar Fruit said speechlessly, There's really nothing going on. If there was anything, I would have asked her out long ago. Perhaps it's because I took care of her in the company, so she would tell me when she was wronged or something. She's the second one. The third one is that girl from Beijing. You said that she's the one that you're leading. She should be interested in you, right? Song Jiwon said casually. Her? She's still all right. Poplar Fruit said weakly. With regard to Zheng Yujie, he really wasn't sure. Still all right. Song Jiwon didn't know how many times he rolled his eyes today. Every time she comes to Yangcheng, she would definitely come to your place to stay. With the bag that she's carrying, it can't be that she can't even afford to stay in a hotel, right? There's a good hotel to stay in, but she came to stay with you. Do you think that you're staying in a palace? Poplar Fruit was silent. Just these three will be enough for you to bear. Now that Xueqing has moved over, if that girl from Beijing comes to stay at your place next time and bumps into you, you'll know what Mars collides with Earth means. Poplar Fruit actually wanted to say that they had bumped into each other a long time ago. Take your time to think about it. Song Jiwon had left out one person, Fong Beibei, whom he hadn't met before. Fong Beibei had come to Poplar Fruit's place more than once or twice, but Song Jiwon had coincidentally returned home every time. Hearing Song Jiwon's words, Poplar Fruit laid in bed that night and couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, but his mind was as blank as the ceiling. He couldn't think of a reason why. It shouldn't be like this. Yangwa pondered in her heart. We were originally good friends. Why did Mosquito's words change the way she thinks about it? Poplar Fruit counted the days after he broke up with Lu Yunran for more than 10 months. Actually, nothing much had changed. His friends were still the same. Perhaps there were more powerful people he had never thought of before, but his attitude towards his friends was still as warm and friendly as before. It was the same for his female friends. He didn't go any further with Duan Xueqing. At most, after she entered society, they interacted more and met more often at gatherings. What about Zheng Yujie? That warm and straightforward girl. Although she was older than him, she felt like a big girl. She was carefree and got along well with him. Poplar Fruit didn't have any thoughts about her. Didn't her brother mention it the last time he went to Beijing? She was already engaged. As for Fong Beibei, Poplar Fruit thought of Fong Beibei, that kind and beautiful girl. She was so much younger than him, but she seemed to be much more mature than him when it came to taking care of children and dogs. Poplar Fruit actually couldn't figure her out. Shouldn't he stop thinking about her? Song Ji-Wen didn't even mention her. If there was one more, it would be a bigger headache. Wait a minute. Why was he so confused? Poplar Fruit patted his head. Perhaps there was no such thing at all. It was all because of Mosquito, that guy. He pondered about relationship problems every day, and even saw other people's pure friendship as problems. Wasn't that right? Lu Jingyi, that cute girl, already had a boyfriend, right? That's right. How could the relationship between a man and a woman be measured by love? In this world, other than men, weren't there all women? Most of them were women. If he had to guess whether a female friend was interested in him or not, how could he have a good time? He should believe that there was a pure friendship between a man and a woman. Fortunately, he thought it through. Otherwise, with Mosquito's words, he wouldn't even be able to be friends. Poplar Fruit patted his chest, his heart still fluttering with fear. Chapter 179. Poplar Fruit wants to buy a car. This idea has been brewing for a long time. From last year until now, he finally made up his mind to buy a car. But who should he look for? If he wants to buy a house, he can consult Luo Feiyue. If he wants to buy a car, it seems that none of his classmates are in this line of work. Poplar Fruit remembered he Wonjua's big brother. His car is the Land Rover that Poplar Fruit especially wants to buy. Should he ask where he bought the car? After receiving a call from Poplar Fruit, he Wonjua, who happened to be free, directly said, "This is a small matter. Leave it to me. You wait for me to pick you up." Poplar Fruit did not wait for long. He Wonjua drove his car over. "Get in the car," he Wonjua said to Poplar Fruit with a cigarette in his mouth. "Big brother, your cigarette?" Poplar Fruit stood in front of the car door, pointed to he Wonjua's mouth, and said, "Oh, I forgot that I have a child." He Wonjua quickly took a puff, opened the window, and threw the cigarette butt out. When the smoke in the car dissipated, Poplar Fruit held Kiki and sat in the passenger seat. "What kind of car do you want to buy?" He Wonjua said while driving. "I have a friend who specializes in car dealership. He has all kinds of cars. I will take you there. The price will definitely be the lowest. I want to buy a Land Rover. I want to buy a sports version of Range Rover." Poplar Fruit laughed. Kiki sat in the car, very curious. Especially the small, swaying doll on the center console attracted Kiki's attention. She constantly leaned forward, wanting to touch it. "Hey, I thought that scholars like you all like delicate little cars like BMWs. He Wonjua said in surprise. "Aha!" Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "That's not necessarily true. I especially like Land Rover, this kind of calm off-road car." He Wonjua gave him a thumbs up and said, "That's how it should be. A martial artist. How can you not have a little spirit? Buy a big car." When they arrived, Poplar Fruit got out of the car and looked around unexpectedly. It was a large car exhibition hall. "There's an exhibition here today, and my friend is also exhibiting here. If you buy a Land Rover, then you can really choose as much as you want. He sells Land Rovers the most, and I don't know how many he brought over today." He Wonjua also got out of the car, closed the door, and pressed the remote control. He Wonjua's friend's face. He was a slightly fat middle-aged man. He's his mind. He said he smiled and said, "He Gongzi, What win-win today? What win-win today, you? Don't tell me you don't like the car you bought? He Wonjua laughed and said, if it doesn't like the car, can you help me return it? Of course not, the middle-aged man said pretentiously. But you can change it. What car do you want? I'll change it for you right away, until you're satisfied. Come on, I'm comfortable driving that car. Lao Gua, I trust your taste. I'm not here to make trouble for you, but my little brother, Poplar Fruit, is here to buy a car today, mainly a Land Rover. You can introduce him. He Wonjua put his hand on Poplar Fruit's shoulder and said. He Wonjua was more than 9 meters tall, and Poplar Fruit was 186 or 187 meters tall. When they stood together, their tall figures attracted a lot of attention. Land Rover? No problem. Today we have a Land Rover exhibition. All the styles of 2011 and 2010 are on display. You can choose at will. Lao was said with a smile. He Wonjua introduced to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit, this is Lao Gua. He'll help me arrange the car today. Don't be fooled by his smile. He looks like a Methriya Buddha, and he's not wearing any gold or silver. He's just a harmless person. This guy is a millionaire with a fortune of over 1 billion yuan, and he's the biggest car dealer in the whole Guangdong province. Ha, you flatter me, childie, Lao Gua said with a smile. Child Yang, I promise you that you'll be satisfied with your new car today. Mr. Gua, you can call me Poplar Fruit. Thank you for your help today, Poplar Fruit said politely. Don't mention it. You can call me Lao Gua, just like Child He. Lao Gua, who was leading the way, turned back and smiled. Hey, Lao Gua, you have to give my little brother the best price you can give him today. We've been through life and death together, He Wonjua said while walking. No problem. Since you're here, I promise I won't make any profit. Lao Gua patted his chest and said. This was the benefit of power. Poplar Fruit was speechless. He Wonjua's father, He Jiuming, was so high that even a millionaire like Lao Gua had to bow to him and accompany him in person. What a fascinating power! But fortunately, He Wonjua was not a rich playboy, so he was a friend worth making. I don't need to introduce the history of Land Rover. Poplar Fruit? You should know about it, right? Lao Gua led He Wonjua and Poplar Fruit to a private room, where the sofa was made of genuine leather and was very comfortable. Soon, the staff came up with many drinks. Lao Gua opened the lids and poured some for Poplar Fruit. Seeing Poplar Fruit nodding, Lao Gua said with a smile, let's get to the point. Land Rover is divided into Discovery, Range Rover, Strider, and Guardian. Among them, Aurora is the delicate model, which is relatively small. Strider is the entry-level model, which is relatively cheap. You can get a good configuration for 5 or 600,000 yuan. Guardian is a bit like a Jeep, which is suitable for off-road driving, but not to the taste of most Chinese. The most popular one is the Range Rover. Its appearance is absolutely as wild as a beast. Of course, there are many different styles of Range Rovers, and the price is much higher than that of the Divine Walker. It all depends on which one you prefer. Lao Gua handed an exquisite brochure printed by them to Yang Gua. Poplar Fruit skimmed through it and found the Range Rover was his favorite. Just like what he had seen on the internet, the sports version of the Range Rover was the most beautiful in these photos. He Wonjua looked at it and nodded, saying, well, Poplar Fruit, the one you're looking at is good. The black one is better. Poplar Fruit shook his head and smiled. I like the white one, which looks more sunny. Ha, what kind of car do you want? You can decide after seeing the current one. After all, the photos are different. Lao Gua didn't hide it and said directly, the sports version of the Range Rover you're looking at is the 2011 version. We also have the new cars of this year in our exhibition hall. Do you want to have a look? Poplar Fruit's interest was aroused, and he said, you have the new ones? Let's go and have a look. When they arrived, Poplar Fruit saw the latest white sports version of the Range Rover at first glance. The front design was very fashionable. The body was wide, the chassis was high, the lines were strong, and the rear design was very sporty. Lao Gua called over a beautiful shopping guide and said, Xiaoxin, tell these two distinguished guests about this new car. Yes, boss. The saleswoman glanced at Lao Gua with her charming eyes, and then introduced to Poplar Fruit in a serious tone. The new Range Rover Sports version of the Range Rover continues the usual strong style of the Land Rover. It has a wheelbase of 178 millimeters longer than the old one, which makes the interior more spacious. It also retains some unique elements of the Land Rover, such as the clamshell hood, the suspension roof, and the vents on the front wing, etc. Of course, the changes are also great. Take the front of the car, for example. While keeping the headlights, its slender lines are bolder and more dynamic. As for the tires, the Range Rover Sports version uses the Pirelli Scorpion Series Verde_All_season tires. The tread-fine lines are tight, and with the wide and continuous longitudinal grooves, it can effectively drain the water and improve the lateral stability and traction force, which makes driving safer. The saleswoman explained in detail, with some English words popping up from time to time. Although he was not interested in these details, Poplar Fruit still listened carefully out of politeness. However, Lao Guo, as a wily old fox, was good at observing people's facial expressions. He immediately noticed the impatience of Poplar Fruit, and he Wenjua. He waved his hand to the saleswoman and said, "Well, let's cut the crap and go straight to the car." The interior was much more high-end than the 2011 version of the Poplar Fruit that Poplar Fruit had seen on the internet. The saleswoman explained with a smile, "The interior of the latest model, we have adopted the new design and the best leather materials." Indeed, the interior was mainly made of leather and metal materials, which had a strong sense of integrity and comfort, both visually and tactile. Looking at the four-spoke steering wheel, Poplar Fruit felt even more satisfied. It had all the control keys for the stereo, driving computer, Bluetooth phone, fixed-speed cruise, and so on. When he touched it, he had the urge to open it up. The dashboard was an LCD screen. Unlike other cars, which actually had things rotating, this dashboard had a very cool design. The virtual pointer was like a flashlight, and only when it was pointed to the scale there would be illuminated. The design of the seat was also very three-dimensional. Apart from the usual front, back, up, down, and angle adjustments, it could also adjust the waist support in all four directions, as well as the side support of the package. The interior of this car was very spacious. With a height of 187 meters, Poplar Fruit could easily stretch his feet in it. The seat was the lowest by default, and there was still a distance of more than 2 fists from the top of the car. If it were a small car, his head would probably touch the roof. The armrest box was designed with 2 layers, and there was no problem to store all kinds of things. There was also a slot for mobile phone charging. When the first layer was lifted, there was a small refrigerator inside, which could even store ordinary bottles of Coke. There was a very large trunk at the back, which was more than 1 meter in width and depth, and could store a lot of things. The saleswoman smiled. "If you think the trunk is too big and wasteful, we can also install the 3rd row of seats for you. Of course, the price." Before she finished, she was interrupted by Lao Guo. "What's the price?" "The seats are free." Poplar Fruit was surprised, and then he smiled. "That's not necessary. I think 2 rows of seats are actually enough. With a trunk, we can store some things. It's quite good." Chapter 180. You like this one? He Wenjua touched the body of the car and asked. "I like it from the bottom of my heart, ha." Poplar Fruit laughed without hesitation since Lao Guo promised to give him a discount. "Then let's try it." He Wenjua laughed. "You know how to drive it, right?" "No problem," Poplar Fruit said confidently. Though he got his driving license in Yangcheng, he would drive his brother-in-law's bus to the fields outside the village for a few laps when he was in college. He could even handle the rugged road, so why would he be afraid of a test drive? "Wait a minute," Poplar Fruit said. "Lao Guo, do you have a baby seat suitable for my child?" Lao Guo didn't know, but the beautiful saleswoman reminded him with a smile. "Boss, we have a child car seat." "Yes, Xian, ask someone to install one, the best one." "Hurry up," Lao Guo ordered. Immediately, 2 people ran over with a box. After a while, they installed a baby seat on the back seat. In fact, it was just a new seat, but in terms of size and design, it was suitable for a child to sit in. The 5-point safety belt could also better protect the child's safety. "Xian, give me the key." Lao Guo waved his hand to get the key and handed it to Poplar Fruit. He opened the door and sat in the back seat, together with Kiki, because Hiwunjua had already taken the passenger seat. Starting the car was a little different from other cars, but as the beautiful saleswoman had explained, Poplar Fruit finished the first step easily. The engine was 5. The large displacement of 0 immediately showed its power, and the beast-like roar made people's blood boil. Lao Gua took out a walkie-talkie and shouted, "Worker Sue, ask someone to open the number 2 door." Then he pointed the way from the back, and Poplar Fruit drove over. Along the way, people who came to check the car saw the big, muscular monster from afar and hurried to avoid it. With some of the fear in their eyes, couldn't hide their envy. Going out of the number 2 door, there was a large track field. In fact, it looked like a track field, but it was actually a test field. Poplar Fruit drove in circles in the test field. The automatic transmission couldn't reflect the cool feeling of drivers stepping on the gas pedal in the racing movies, so Poplar Fruit could only control the car by pressing the buttons on the gear lever, which was a little bit effeminate but a fly in the ointment. But when the car's speed soared over 100 kilometers per hour, the perfect control of the Land Rover began to show, and it felt stable when it was turning in such a small field. Sitting in the back seat, Lao Gua watched the scene outside the window spinning and flying backward. His face was a little pale, but he didn't dare to say anything and had to risk his life to accompany the gentleman. Back at the exhibition hall, the car stopped. Lao Gua got off the car with weak legs and held the door. Seeing that Poplar Fruit and Hiwunjua were fine, he shook his head with lingering fear. He couldn't compare himself with these two non-human beings. How many normal people dared to speed at 130 kilometers per hour in a test field the size of a football field? He looked at Kiki, who was fixed in the child safety seat, and found that Kiki didn't react at all. She looked as usual, with a happy smile on her face. Lao Gua felt that he had been hit hard, but such speed was exactly what Hiwunjua wanted. He laughed and said, "Poplar Fruit, this car is awesome. Next time, I'll take you to the field, where the highway is even better." Poplar Fruit got off the car, touched the hood with satisfaction, and said with a smile, "This car, I've made up my mind." Though there were still some sequelae, Lao Gua put on a smile and called his subordinate, "Xiaoxin, go get the list." Going through the price list, Lao Gua said to Poplar Fruit and Hiwunjua, "This car is top of the line. Our price is 1.8 million to the public. To show respect to Child He and Poplar Fruit, we have to give you the lowest price. I'll waive the change and only ask for 1.2 million. He explained, "Apart from other things, I won't make any profit from this car. I'm just making friends with Poplar Fruit. Of course, if you think 5.0 displacement is too big, you can also choose 3.0 displacement, 3.0 displacement, only 900,000. Lao Gua was really good at talking. He gave Yonggua 2 choices of price, but didn't embarrass Yonggua just because of the price. "What do you think? Which one do you like?" Hiwunjua looked at Poplar Fruit and asked. Before coming here, Poplar Fruit had learned about the price. The 2011 version of the same model sold for more than 1.6 million in the market. Poplar Fruit had thought that if he didn't have enough money, he could buy a lower configuration car. But he didn't expect that Lao Gua would give him so much face and waive the 600,000 profit. Now he could choose a higher configuration car. Wasn't it just 1.2 million? Poplar Fruit could afford it. What Ardell gave him, plus the translation fee for the past few months, the balance in his bank account was much more than this number. 3.0 was definitely less than 5.0 displacement. If he could buy the car he liked, he could spend more money. Poplar Fruit chose 5 without hesitation. 0 displacement, top configuration. Pay by card. Lao Gua didn't hesitate. He asked someone to take Poplar Fruit's ID card to deal with the registration, insurance, and other miscellaneous matters. No wonder he was the #1 car seller in Guangdong. Many things were given the green light. Poplar Fruit sat in Lao Gua's office for less than 15 minutes, and all the formalities were done. At noon, Hiwunjua invited Lao Gua to lunch in a big hotel, VIP room, and all kinds of luxurious dishes. But when Poplar Fruit rushed to pay, he found that Lao Gua had already asked someone to put it on his tab. On the way back, Hiwunjua, who had drunk a little, gave his car to Lao Gua and asked him to find someone to drive it back to him. He himself sat comfortably in Poplar Fruit's new car. "Do you think I'm a Philistine today?" He said with half-squinted eyes. "No." Poplar Fruit looked straight ahead and said, "It doesn't matter. Sometimes when facing businessmen like Lao Gua, you really have to put on airs." He said, "If you don't put on airs, he will think you want to do something to him. You can't even be friends with him. Lao Gua is a good man. He's good at dealing with people. It's reasonable that his business is doing well. If you have relatives who want to buy a car, you can go to him. It's impossible for him to give you the lowest price today, but it's still possible for him to give you a discount of 100,000. Poplar Fruit answered with "The military camp is the best." Was stretched and said, "I can speak directly to my brothers. There's no need to wear a mask." "Haha, I also think it's simpler to be a soldier." Poplar Fruit laughed. "Then next month, I'll take you to the military camp when you visit your family." Laughed. "I'll be busy these days." Poplar Fruit drove home and then drove Kiki back home. Although they couldn't drive too fast on the urban road, it still felt very pleasant to drive such a huge car. Poplar Fruit touched the leather-wrapped steering wheel and couldn't bear to put it down. "This is my car." Chapter 181. Poplar Fruit didn't plan to go home directly. He parked the car on the side of the road and took out his phone to call Song Ji-won. The Range Rover had a Bluetooth phone function. However, Poplar Fruit hadn't set it up yet, and he didn't buy a Bluetooth headset. For Kiki's safety, Poplar Fruit chose to park the car on the side of the road to make the call. "Hello? What do you want from me?" Song Ji-won shouted as soon as the phone was connected. "Are you busy?" Poplar Fruit asked. "No, but you never call me at this time." "Tell me, what's the matter?" Song Ji-won said. "Are you off work?" Poplar Fruit asked. "Not yet, but soon. I'll be off work at 5:30, Song Ji-won said. "Then wait for me at the entrance of the unit. I'll have dinner with you tonight to celebrate." Poplar Fruit laughed. "Oh, what's the big news?" Song Ji-won laughed. "How long has it been since the Lantern Festival? Celebrating again?" Poplar Fruit deliberately kept him in suspense. "You'll know later. Wait for me at the unit after work." "Damn, so mysterious. All right, I'll wait and see what good news there is. I still have something to do here. I'll hang up first." Song Ji-won hung up the phone. Poplar Fruit placed the phone in the groove of the armrest. He looked around and was ready to start the car. However, Poplar Fruit's hand that was about to touch the key stopped. He saw a few familiar faces. Fule, the crew cut, and a few youths from the Xingyi martial arts school. They were just passing by at the intersection ahead, talking and laughing with their arms around each other's shoulders. Poplar Fruit could recognize them because of the black sports shirts they were wearing. It was the same as the sports shirts he saw before. They were printed with the words Xingyi. Poplar Fruit didn't expect to see them when he randomly parked his car. Poplar Fruit still hadn't settled the score with them at Hot Pot City before the new year. They bullied ordinary people and children and taught them a lesson. If it wasn't for the police coming at the right time and arresting the motorcycle hooligans, Yangguo would probably have suffered more. Poplar Fruit still blamed them for Liang Jinglin's death. Poplar Fruit had wanted to talk to them for a long time. However, he didn't have the time. Zheng Yujie still had some miscellaneous things to do, so he couldn't get away. Of course, this also had something to do with the fact that Poplar Fruit had called Liu Gillen and the others to confirm that no one had come to harass them again. Sitting in the car, Poplar Fruit watched with a complicated expression as these people walked out of the street. He followed them from a distance until he saw them walk into an old building. Poplar Fruit turned the car around and parked it on the opposite side of the street. He looked at the building through the car window. It was 3 stories high and looked quite old. There were still wooden cornices and a wooden plaque outside. The plaque had the words "Gua Family Xingyi Boxing Dojo" written on it. Poplar Fruit didn't know much about calligraphy, but he could still see that the words were written with vigor and strength. It was as if a fierce tiger was coming out of the plaque. Is this the meaning of Xingyi boxing? Poplar Fruit looked at the words in a daze. There seemed to be something flashing in his mind, but he couldn't grasp it. His Xingyi boxing wasn't good. It had stagnated for more than a month. What he lacked was this meaning. These few words contained a surging artistic conception. Unfortunately, Yonghwa couldn't find any clues even after looking at them for a long time. Poplar Fruit looked at the time. It was obvious that he wouldn't be able to ask them for an explanation today. However, it seemed that they didn't come looking for trouble again. Poplar Fruit looked back at Kiki, whose eyes were wide open. Kiki smiled at him. Her innocent and pure smile warmed Poplar Fruit's heart. "Forget it. Since there's nothing, I won't cause any more trouble." Poplar Fruit shook his head, started the car, and drove away. They were almost at Song Jiwin's unit. Poplar Fruit didn't park the car in front of his unit. Now that Song Jiwin hadn't come out yet, how could there be a surprise if he parked the car in front of the door? He reversed the car into a side alley and exposed the front of the car. Poplar Fruit could see through the greenery on the side of the road to see if Song Jiwin had come out. His phone suddenly rang. Poplar Fruit thought it was Song Jiwin, but when he picked it up, it was Zheng Yujie. "Yujie, what's wrong?" Poplar Fruit asked gently. Zheng Yujie didn't talk much nonsense with him and went straight to the point. "Didn't you say that you wanted to buy the copyright of Young Pai's Fantasy Drifting from Yilin Publishing?" "Yeah. How's it going?" Poplar Fruit asked. It wasn't going well at first. They wanted to keep the copyright in their hands and not give it to us. However, later on, I used some connections to communicate with them. Yilin agreed to sell us the copyright. Zheng Yujie smiled. Poplar Fruit said in surprise, "Then can I start translating this book?" "Not yet," Zheng Yujie said. "The foreign author named Yang Martel? He doesn't believe in our ability. He's afraid that we'll ruin his book again." Yonghwa was a bit speechless. Can it be as bad as this even if it's ruined? Is he waiting for the right price to sell it? Zheng Yujie said, "I don't think so. He just lacks confidence. However, if director Lian really makes this movie, then he'll really be waiting for the right price to sell it. Dongxin also needs to consider whether the price is suitable or not." "So, what do you mean?" Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. "I mean, before he becomes popular, we should persuade him and get the copyright," Zheng Yujie said. "Persuade him?" Poplar Fruit was even more confused. "Yes, so this time I want to ask, do you have a passport?" "Let's go to America to find Yang Martel next month," Zheng Yujie said. "Wait, Yang Martel? Is it Martel Ghanaian?" Poplar Fruit interrupted. "I remember that he lives in Saskatoon. If we go to Saskatoon next month, we won't be able to find him," Zheng Yujie explained. "He's going to America for a lecture tour and book signing next month. We'll go directly to America to find him." "I see." Poplar Fruit nodded. He was free next month, and it was good to go abroad to see the world. "But I don't have a passport. That's why I'm asking you if you have a passport." Zheng Yujie laughed. "Then I'll get one," Poplar Fruit said. "You don't have to do it yourself. It's too troublesome." Zheng Yujie said. "Send me your ID card and household register. I'll get someone to do it for you." "What about Kiki?" Poplar Fruit asked. "She has to go with me." "If it's about Kiki, wait a moment." Zheng Yujie didn't hang up. She tapped on the computer for a while, then said, "Send me Kiki's birth certificate too. We'll do it together." "Okay." Poplar Fruit laughed. He chatted with Zheng Yujie for a while longer before hanging up. Poplar Fruit looked up and found that Song Jiwin had already come out. He was standing by the street in front of the unit, looking around. He was a little impatient. "Oh no, I was so focused on talking about going abroad that I forgot about him." Poplar Fruit quickly restarted the car and went around. Song Jiwin was really impatient. He had been out for a long time, but Poplar Fruit still hadn't arrived. Even when he called, the line was busy. Damn it! He turned his head and looked around. Suddenly, he saw a huge Land Rover driving over. Although the white coating seemed to weaken the momentum, the strong and dynamic lines were still very domineering. The car drove over aggressively. Song Jiwin was shocked and quickly moved aside. He was afraid that this unreasonable guy would run over him. The car stopped next to Song Jiwin. The door of the front passenger seat opened by itself. Song Jiwin was bewildered as he took a peek. He was stunned by what he saw. Then he stood up and opened the car door. He shouted at Yonghwa, who couldn't hold back her laughter. Fuck. Fuck, it's you." He didn't wait for Poplar Fruit to reply. He lovingly walked around the car and touched it. Then he excitedly said to Poplar Fruit, "Fuck." Where did you get this car? He, Poplar Fruit laughed. Can't I buy it myself? How is that possible? Song Ji-won said in disbelief. You really bought it? He saw that Poplar Fruit was just smiling and didn't answer. He began to ask with uncertainty. Yes, I just picked it up. Get in, Poplar Fruit said. Song Ji-won stepped on the pedals and climbed into the car. After closing the door, Poplar Fruit drove forward. TSK, TSK. Song Ji-won touched the smooth leather of the center console and said with intoxication, Good car, good car. You really bought it? Song Ji-won asked again. Yes. Poplar Fruit pulled out the stack of paper and threw it to Song Ji-won. Song Ji-won took it and flipped through it. He sighed. Fuck, you bought a car worth 2 million yuan. Rich man. He didn't know how many times he had said fuck today. Hey, don't swear. There are children here. Poplar Fruit pointed to the back and said, Hi, Kiki. Song Ji-won turned his head and smiled as he greeted Kiki. Kiki sat in her exclusive seat and smiled as she waved her hand. Poplar Fruit hadn't driven 2 streets when Song Ji-won impatiently urged Poplar Fruit and said, Quick, let me drive 2 laps. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to stop the car and get out of the driver's seat. Song Ji-won couldn't wait to jump in. Poplar Fruit didn't return to the front passenger seat where Song Ji-won had just sat. Instead, he went to the back and sat beside Kiki. He unfastened her seat belt and carried her in front of him. After driving, Kiki stayed in the back alone. Poplar Fruit had to accompany Kiki. Drive slowly. This car has a lot of horsepower, Poplar Fruit instructed. Song Ji-won stepped on the brakes and listened to the loud roar of the engine. He said intoxicatedly, Good. It's really good. This car is definitely good to drive. He eased off the accelerator and drove forward. Oh. Song Ji-won shouted excitedly as he drove. Song Ji-won drove for more than 20 minutes. Poplar Fruit said to him, Let's find a place to eat. What's the rush? I'm not hungry yet. Song Ji-won, who still hadn't had his fill, shouted. You're not hungry, but my daughter is. Poplar Fruit said speechlessly. Hurry up, we bought the car. Are you still worried about not having a chance to drive it? Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 182. On this day, a strange man came to Poplar Fruit's neighborhood. He drove his electric bicycle over and stopped at a secluded corner. He was wearing a cap, a pair of light brown sunglasses, and light gray sportswear. The zipper of his shirt was pulled up high. If he put on a mask, he would look like a celebrity. The strange man took out a tablet from his sling bag, looked at it, nodded, put away the tablet, and walked to the entrance of the neighborhood. There was a security guard at the entrance of the residential area. He wanted to sneak in behind the others, but a guard with a pair of piercing eyes stopped him and said with a smile, Sir, please swipe your card to enter and exit. The strange man's lips curled up as if he was used to this situation. He took out a pack of soft Chunghwa cigarettes from his pocket and stuffed it into the guard's hand. He smiled gently and said, I forgot to bring my card. Please make an exception. The property management of this high-end neighborhood was very strict. The guard also had a surveillance camera above his head. Although he was a little tempted by the pack of cigarettes, he did not dare to cross the line. After all, a pack of cigarettes cost less than 100 yuan. If he lost his job, it would not be a matter of a few hundred yuan. The guard put on a straight face and stuffed the pack of cigarettes back. He said seriously, If you are the owner, come to us and show us your ID and give us your house number for verification. The strange man did not agree. He took out another pack of cigarettes, put the 2 packs together, and stuffed it into the guard's hand. He smiled flatteringly and said, Really, I am in a hurry. Please make an exception. No, this is the rule. The guard's face became serious. He stared at him and said, Either swipe your card, sign up, or get out. The strange man saw that he could not get through and could only walk away. He wasn't willing to give up. He walked around the neighborhood and finally found a wall without any surveillance. He clapped his hands, stretched his body, and then jumped up. He kicked the wall, turned around, and kicked the tree trunk behind him. With 2 kicks, he flew over the 2-meter-high protective wall. After landing steadily, the strange man sneered, showing his disdain for the neighborhood's security level. He walked on the main road of the neighborhood. Following the directions on the map on the tablet, the strange man arrived at the apartment building that was for rent. "It's here." The strange man chuckled and nodded. Perhaps it was his occupational disease, but he was always alone. From time to time, he would talk to himself involuntarily. After finding a relatively dense tree and seeing that there was no one around, the strange man quickly climbed up and hid among the leaves. He pulled out something from his backpack, grabbed the 2 corners of it, and shook it lightly. A rectangular net was shaken open. After busying himself for a while, a net bed was built by him. Feeling the weight of the bed, the strange man smiled and lay down comfortably on it. His sling bag wasn't big, but it was just like Doraemon's treasure bag. It was as if he could get whatever he wanted. He took out a few components from inside, and with a nimble twist of his hands, an SLR camera was assembled. Glancing at the apartment building, the strange man waited for a while before he felt bored. He took out his tablet and started playing games. On the first day, he sat there until night fell. He only went back when night fell. The next day, he came again at around 10 o'clock. He sat until night fell and finally saw the person he was waiting for. Poplar Fruit. Although the strange man's eyes were glued to the tablet, he still paid attention to the entrance of the apartment. As soon as Poplar Fruit appeared, he noticed it. He immediately put away the tablet and picked up the SLR camera that he had cleaned several times today. Poplar Fruit had just taken Kiki to the small garden for a walk. On the way back, they happened to meet Duan Shueching, who had gotten off work early. The 2 of them came back together. The lively dog Goldie was the first to rush to the front of the apartment building. It looked back at Poplar Fruit, who was slowly walking over. It then used its short legs, after all, it was only a few months old, to climb the stairs. One step after another, it finally ran into the apartment building. Poplar Fruit smiled. He pointed at Goldie's honest face as it climbed the stairs for Duan Shueching to see. Duan Shueching also showed a rare smile. The strange man hiding in the tree kept taking pictures of Poplar Fruit and the others. He also adjusted the focus from time to time so that he and Duan Shueching's expressions could be seen more clearly. As he chatted and laughed with Duan Shueching, Poplar Fruit was about to step onto the stairs of the apartment building. Suddenly he stopped. "What's wrong?" Duan Shueching saw him frown. She looked around and asked. Poplar Fruit didn't know why, but he felt that something was strange. It was a familiar feeling. When he was in school, he would secretly do something and then look up to see the teacher staring at him. This strange feeling was the same as being stared at by the teacher. It was very mysterious and couldn't be described with words. He looked at his surroundings, but he didn't feel any changes. Goldie turned around and saw that the 2 of them hadn't come up yet. He anxiously called out. When Poplar Fruit heard Goldie's call, he came back to his senses. He smiled and said to Duan Shueching, "It's nothing. Let's go back." He must have been thinking too much. He was just an ordinary otaku. Why would someone stare at him? It was too funny. Seeing that Poplar Fruit and the others' voices had disappeared into the apartment building, the strange man let out a sigh of relief. He wiped his cold sweat and wiped it on his clothes. Poplar Fruit's performance just now really scared him. He thought that he had given himself away and was discovered. Fortunately, it was more dangerous than dangerous. He also took the photos he wanted. The strange man looked around and made sure that no one was nearby. He put away the net bed and jumped out of the corner. The next day, in Liang Jinglin's residence, a luxurious villa, the strange man was sitting on a soft sofa with a glass of red wine. He crossed his legs and said to Liang Jinglin, "The photos you wanted. That guy called Poplar Fruit and a beautiful woman." He swirled the red wine and smelled it, intoxicated. Then he gently took a sip. "That little bitch." Liang Jinglin looked at the photos and gritted his teeth. "I didn't expect her to live with Poplar Fruit." He suddenly raised his head and stared at the strange man. "Your photos are not what I want." The strange man raised his head and glanced at him. "This is not enough. These photos are not enough to ruin their reputation." Liang Zhenglin fiercely slammed the table and said, I want something more shocking. Do you understand? I want photos that will make people despise them. I don't care if you take photos of them or what. Give me something valuable. The strange man waved his hand in the air and said, Young Master Liang, don't be impatient. Your request is not simple. Of course, no matter how difficult it is, I can help you settle it. But the price we will have to renegotiate. Money is not a problem. Liang Zhenglin raised the photos in his hand and slammed them on the table. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 183. Poplar Fruit went to school again today. With a car, everything was much more convenient. He drove from his house and arrived at the school in less than 20 minutes. Of course, it was also because Poplar Fruit didn't go during the peak hours. Today, Poplar Fruit was preparing to look at a house. He saw the rental information of the teacher's apartment near the school on the school forum. Poplar Fruit had passed by this place when he was studying. Although it was built in the last century, it was almost 20 years old. At least from the outside, it looked very good. Looking at the photos posted by the old professor, Poplar Fruit also liked it very much. One room and one living room. The decoration was quite cozy. The rent wasn't too expensive. Compared to the other houses nearby, it was a good price. If he rented Poplar Fruit, he would probably live here for a few days every week when he went to graduate school in the future. Of course, Poplar Fruit also considered simply renting a house next to the school. He didn't need to travel between two places. However, that would be far away from Song Jiwen and Duan Xueqing. He still preferred the feeling of hanging out with Song Jiwen and the others. It was a bit like the classic American sitcom, Friends. Renting two houses was still affordable for Poplar Fruit at the moment. He was now focusing on translating small languages. The translation remuneration was getting more and more. Moreover, after he went to graduate school, he heard from the dean that he would get a lot of allowance every month as a teaching assistant. Of course, the small amount of money couldn't be compared to what Poplar Fruit usually earned, but it was more than enough to rent a house. However, before he went to look at the house, Poplar Fruit still went to the school building first. Today, he had an appointment with the dean to give him a learning report. Poplar Fruit had reported once before. However, this time was special because it was the first time he brought Kiki there. After Fong Beibei went home for a few days, Poplar Fruit had to bite the bullet and take Kiki there. Not only was Chen Zongdai not angry when he saw Chi-Chi, but he was also very happy. He said, I've seen your reports and heard that you have a child. You're finally willing to bring him here for me to see? Although Poplar Fruit had not officially entered the school yet, he had already saluted Chen Zongdai as a disciple. He smiled and said, I was afraid that I would disturb your work. What are you talking about? This is Chen Zongdai's territory. Do you think it can accommodate a child? Chen Zongdai said with a smile as he carried Kiki back to his seat. After listening to Poplar Fruit's report, Chen Zongdai became more and more satisfied with his new disciple. Not only did he finish reading all the books that he arranged for him to read, but he also seriously understood them. Chen Zongdai did not care if Poplar Fruit could memorize the contents of the books. What he appreciated was that after Poplar Fruit finished reading the books, he could still come up with a lot of inferences and come up with a lot of questions to discuss with the teacher. The happiest thing between a teacher and a disciple was this kind of academic interaction. Not bad, not bad. You learn very fast. After the discussion and guidance came to an end, Chen Zongdai raised his head and avoided Kiki's hand that was grabbing his beard. Kiki, Poplar Fruit's eyes widened. She only stopped being naughty after he scared her. Hey, why are you scaring the child? Chen Zongdai immediately changed from being the victim to being Kiki's protector. He blew his beard and glared at Poplar Fruit. Recently, you went to Professor Wang's class. How do you feel? Chen Zongdai asked. I'm still slowly learning Professor Wang's teaching techniques. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, I've never been a teacher before, so I don't have any confidence at all. Chen Zongdai waved his hand and said, Don't worry. You still have a long time to learn. When you come in, sometimes Professor Wong will ask you to substitute for the undergraduate classes. After more practice, you will gain more experience. To be honest, Chen Zhongdai was not too anxious to see the school produce results in Swedish. This was because it was impossible for Poplar Fruit to hold up the flag alone. If Poplar Fruit could inherit his legacy in linguistics, and if he could surpass him, then Chen Zhongdai would have already picked up a treasure. The Swedish class was just a bonus. He wanted Poplar Fruit to teach the class on a whim. It would be great if he could succeed, but if he couldn't, there was still a way out for him. Poplar Fruit said, "Professor Wong still takes good care of me. After class, she will patiently answer my questions." Chen Zhongdai nodded slightly. After chatting for a while, Poplar Fruit looked at the time and said, "Teacher, do you have anything else? If not, I'll go out first." "Don't you want to stay and eat with us later?" Chen Zhongdai asked. Last time, Poplar Fruit accompanied him to the cafeteria to eat a teacher's meal. The food in the school was generally bad, and the teachers did not eat any better. However, Chen Zhongdai still insisted on eating in the cafeteria every afternoon. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "No, I'm going to look at a house later. I have an appointment with the landlord this morning." "You want to rent a house?" Chen Zhongdai asked. "Wait a few months, and you'll have a dormitory. The postgraduate dormitory is much better than your undergraduate dormitory." Poplar Fruit complained in his heart, "Teacher, how many years has it been since you went down to see the people's situation? You don't even know the plight of the students. Not to mention the postgraduate students. Even the doctoral students' dormitories are decades old." It's sad to see them. Of course, whether it was good or bad, Poplar Fruit did not plan to live in a dormitory. He explained, "Usually I have to take care of the child. It's not convenient to live in a dormitory. It's better to go out and rent a house." Chen Zhongdai knew that people who had reached Poplar Fruit's level of English were basically not short of money. They could casually go out and work as an interpreter to earn back the money. He did not say anything. He handed Kiki back to Poplar Fruit and let him rent a house. Poplar Fruit walked out, then knocked on the door and came back. "Teacher, I forgot something." "What is it?" Chen Zhongdai asked. "I want to ask if the school can help me get a pass. It's inconvenient to drive here without a pass." Poplar Fruit smiled. "Okay, I'll find someone to help you. You can write down the license plate number for me. You can come and get it next time." Chen Zhongdai did not care about it. It was a small matter. After leaving the school building, Poplar Fruit drove out from the school's back door. The teacher's dormitory was less than a 3-minute drive away. After setting the time, Poplar Fruit pressed the doorbell. A white-haired old man came to open the door for him. "Hello." The old man looked very healthy. He wore a pair of big framed glasses and greeted with a smile. "Hello." Poplar Fruit carried Kiki and walked in with a smile. "Look around. Don't look down on this old man for not tidying up his things," the old man said with a smile. Poplar Fruit looked at the room that was neatly arranged except for a few books on the coffee table. He said, "Your room is too tidy. If this is not tidying up, then I really don't know where else in the world can be tidied up." "You're moving away?" Poplar Fruit looked around the room. There were a few leather suitcases in the corner and one that was being packed. "Yeah, I've already retired. I don't have to go to school anymore. It's time for me to go back to my hometown." The old man smiled. "You're a teacher?" Poplar Fruit said in surprise. "A professor at Higashiyama University?" He asked because the teacher's dormitory here was originally built for the teachers of Higashiyama University. However, after the price of housing rose, many teachers sold their houses. Therefore, most of the people who lived here were not teachers. "Yeah, this house. If I came to school, I would live here. It's been more than 10 years. If I didn't have to go back to my hometown, I wouldn't be willing to rent it out," the old man said. So it was an old professor from his alma mater. Poplar Fruit was in awe. He asked, "I haven't asked for your name yet." "It's not a big name. You can just call me Old Tan." The old man was very cheerful and kept smiling. "Teacher Tan." Poplar Fruit didn't dare to call him by his surname. He still respectfully called him teacher. "I'm also from Higashiyama University. No matter what, I have to call you teacher." Kiki looked curiously at the white-bearded old man in front of her. Her eyes glanced at the old man's beard from time to time. It seemed to be longer than Grandpa Chen's beard. Kiki felt her hands itch. She wanted to reach out and pinch it. However, she was quickly carried away by her father. Poplar Fruit was led around the house by the old man. He looked inside and out. The more he looked at the house, the more satisfied he was with it. The house was simple. Inside, there was a simple style everywhere. Whether it was the living room or the room, there was not much furniture. There were only 2 or 3 rattan chairs, an old coffee table, and a long solid-wood table. Even the clean walls were only covered with a thin layer of white dust. There were no decorative tiles. It could be said that it was a completely different world from the place Yangguo was living in now. But what was the point of that? The rattan chair could be sat on or laid down. It was a good choice for reading quietly. The coffee table was old. It didn't matter at all. Drinking tea was more enjoyable. The long solid-wood table was big enough for Fong Beibei to teach. There weren't any pictures or photos on the walls. However, there was a blackboard and a screen for scribbling and writing. It could also be used for projecting. The house was also so warm. It was facing south and wouldn't be tortured by the scorching sun. There was a small balcony outside the frosted glass window. The old man had planted some green plants. It was now filled with the smell of spring. Although it was only a room and a living room of 40 square meters, there was a small balcony, a kitchen, and a bathroom. It didn't give people the feeling of being cramped. Moreover, it was close to the school. It was even closer to Fong Beibei's dormitory. If Fong Beibei came here, she would be there in less than 15 minutes. That rattan chair, if you don't want it, I can get someone to move it away. The old man saw Poplar Fruit looking at the rattan chair a few times and quickly explained. He felt that Poplar Fruit was the type of tenant he was looking for. His clothes were very clean. Although he brought a child, a man who was willing to take care of a child must be a very careful person. He wouldn't make his house unsightly. Moreover, Poplar Fruit had a faint temperament. It was the temperament of a scholar. It gave him the feeling that he was one of his own. "Oh no, you don't have to move it." Poplar Fruit laughed. "I like it. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to." Chapter 184. You're renting a house here because you're working nearby, right? The old man guessed based on Poplar Fruit's age and temperament. Poplar Fruit smiled. Regarding this question, he could nod his head. Wasn't he going to teach in school in the future? However, that would only be a cameo. His main job was still a student. Therefore, Poplar Fruit answered honestly, "No, I'm back for my master's degree." "Oh, master's degree? That's good, that's good." The old man laughed and said, "Young people need to keep learning. Only then can they contribute to the country and society." "Who's your mentor?" The old man asked with great interest. "Professor Chen Zongdai." Poplar Fruit said. "Professor Chen," the old man said with respect. "He's an amazing person." Seeing that Poplar Fruit didn't understand, he smiled and said, "You still don't know? Your teacher was selected as a Changjiang scholar not long ago. This is an honor that many people can't get. He's still so young, so he has a lot of potential." The word young sounded weird. However, Poplar Fruit thought about his teacher's age, which was in his 50s. Then he thought about the old man's 70 or 80 years old age and understood. If it weren't for the fact that there are no academicians in liberal arts, I think your teacher would have the ability to be an academician. The old man was still praising Chen Zongdai. Poplar Fruit felt honored that his teacher was being praised. "No, the price is too high. We're all on the same side. We don't need such a high rent. If you want to rent, just pay 1,000 yuan a month." The old man said as he adjusted his reading glasses and looked at the contract in his hand. In the beginning, Poplar Fruit negotiated with him for 2,000 yuan. Poplar Fruit felt that 2,000 yuan was reasonable for a house in such a location. However, when the old man heard that Poplar Fruit was Chen Zongdai's student, he immediately reduced the price by half for Poplar Fruit. However, Poplar Fruit couldn't accept it. The old man was an honest person. He didn't want the old man to be taken advantage of. Moreover, if Chen Zongdai knew that his teacher owed a debt of gratitude for no reason, he would definitely beat him to death. Poplar Fruit held the old man's hand and said, "No, no, 2,000 yuan is enough. Don't change it. Why would I take so much money from you? I'm old and have nowhere to spend it. Moreover, if you live here, you can help me take care of the house and take care of the plants." The old man struggled a few times but couldn't break free. He said helplessly, "No, Teacher Tan, that's not how we calculate our bills. You can't change it." Poplar Fruit said, if they didn't listen to the beginning and only heard Poplar Fruit's words, others might think that the old man was trying to extort money from him. "Your house should be at this price. I don't need this 1,000 yuan, so we'll do as we've discussed. Give me the contract," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. The old man couldn't argue with him, so he had to sign the contract. Because it would take a day or two to move, the old man took out a key and gave it to Poplar Fruit. He asked him to come over in 2 days. After a few days, Poplar Fruit climbed out of the manuscript and remembered about the newly rented house. Therefore, he excitedly carried Kiki out of the house. When he walked downstairs, a child was holding his mother's hand and shouted, "Mom, Mom, I want to go to the zoo." "Didn't you go there already? What's there to see in the zoo except for tigers?" "Be good. Next time, Mom will take you to the water park." The child's mother gave him an illusory picture of a pie, which immediately coaxed him. It's not right for parents to lie like this. However, Poplar Fruit changed his mind. He wanted to go to the zoo first. The more he practiced Xingyi Quan, the more it felt wrong. He couldn't find a feeling. Instead, it was more like a fast Wing Chun, which was close combat. Poplar Fruit mastered it very quickly. Yang Guo wasn't willing to give up until he had gnawed on the bones of Xingyi Fist. He had looked up a lot of information. Some said that Xingyi Fist originated from the observation of animals. For example, one of the most important parts of Xingyi Fist was the Xingyi 12 Forms Fist. It simulated the life forms and fighting abilities of 12 different animals to form a set of fist techniques. Just when he heard the word tiger, Poplar Fruit thought of the tiger form boxing. Perhaps going to the zoo would give him some inspiration. Poplar Fruit guessed. Therefore, Poplar Fruit drove straight to the zoo. After buying the ticket, Poplar Fruit followed the huge crowd into the zoo. Of course, Poplar Fruit didn't feel that this scene was a big deal. After all, he had seen a big scene like the Forbidden City. Looking at the rows of animals flashing in front of her eyes, Kiki thought that her father was bringing her out to play today. She excitedly put her hands on her father's shoulders and shouted nonstop. Poplar Fruit went directly to Tiger Mountain. Although it was called a mountain, it was actually a small rockery. The cage was a little bigger than the other animals. As the saying goes, a mountain can't have 2 tigers. However, in Tiger Mountain, there were obviously more than 2 tigers. Poplar Fruit counted. There was another tiger hiding in the back. Its tail had already exposed it. I have to look at their expressions and movements, Poplar Fruit thought. He stared at the tigers seriously. Chi-Chi, on the other hand, looked at the tiger and found it very boring. She turned her little head and looked around. Of course, she was bored. How could those 3 tigers be called tigers? They were simply lazy bugs. All of them were lying lazily under the sun. Their eyes were narrowed listlessly. Occasionally, they would open their mouths and yawn. After watching for a while, Poplar Fruit was speechless, expecting these 3 tigers to train their minds. They were not as fierce as Poplar Fruit when he fought. What a miscalculation. Poplar Fruit also understood. The tigers in the zoo had been fed until they lost their wildness. How could they still have the aura of the king of the jungle? Poplar Fruit suddenly felt his hair being tugged. He turned around and saw Kiki pouting and looking at him unhappily. Her father had been standing there for a long time. She pointed at the baboon cage on the other side and shouted anxiously, "They're there! All right, today, I'll treat it as bringing you to the zoo to play." Poplar Fruit was relieved. He patted Kiki's little butt and smiled. "Let's go." Kiki did not cause too much of a commotion in the zoo this time. At most, some animals would deliberately run to the cage and reach out to her for food when they saw Kiki. After visiting the zoo, Poplar Fruit drove to IKEA and the supermarket to buy some things. In a new home, some furniture still needed to be added. Some personal items also needed to be bought. Poplar Fruit arranged for large items like mattresses and tables to be delivered to his door. As for mats, blankets, and some daily necessities, Poplar Fruit stuffed them all into the trunk of the car. After shopping, the trunk was not completely full. On the way back to his new home, Poplar Fruit smiled with satisfaction. It was so convenient to have a car, and such a big car at that. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 185. On Wednesday morning, Poplar Fruit drove to the Muda tea house that had left a deep impression on him because Yao Dehua had finally returned. Poplar Fruit hadn't seen Yao Dehua for a long time. Since the big boss had opened the company from Guangdong province to all the major provinces in the country, he had been extremely busy. Sometimes he even had to take 2 flights a day to attend meetings in 2 branches. Although he had never been at the helm of such a big company before, Yao Dehua still understood that a boss couldn't do everything by himself. In the beginning, Yao Dehua needed to go to various places to help the regional managers. After the company was on the right track, he didn't run around to interfere with everyone's work. Properly delegating power was a good thing for the company's development. Of course, for a middle-aged uncle, these few months were still very tiring. When Poplar Fruit saw Yao Dehua, his hairline began to climb up again. "Brother Yao, you've lost a lot of weight." Poplar Fruit sat down and sighed with a smile. "It can't be helped. There are too many things to worry about." Yao Dehua had rested for 2 days, but he still looked tired. He looked at Poplar Fruit, who was holding the child, and smiled. "You're still living a carefree life. You haven't changed at all. Kiki, on the other hand, has grown a lot." "Kiki, call Uncle Yao." Poplar Fruit shook Kiki's little arm and said, "Uncle Yao." Although she didn't quite recognize Yao Dehua, Chi-Chi still obediently followed her father's words and called out crisply, "She can speak?" Yao Dehua asked with some surprise. "Her pronunciation is very clear." "That's not right. I remember that Chi-Chi was also—" He counted with his fingers, and Poplar Fruit smiled and said the result for him. "She's now a little more than 10 months old. She's not even 1 year old yet." "Amazing, amazing," Yao Dehua said without flattery. Kiki's intelligence is comparable to Poplar Fruit's. Like father, like daughter. "I'm not that good," Poplar Fruit said modestly. After chatting with Yao Dehua for a while, Poplar Fruit learned about the current situation of Xinda Translation Company. If one were to describe the situation, it would be, the situation is good, but the timing is lacking. Good wine was also afraid of being in deep alleys. Xinda Translation Company's system was very advanced and effective. They also needed to do publicity to increase their reputation. This time, they rushed out of Guangdong province mainly on the road of campus promotion. What was campus promotion? They would select some elite clubs or ambitious students from various universities to serve as campus promotion ambassadors. They would organize some activities to attract translation enthusiasts to understand and join the platform created by Xinda Translation Company. The platform was a win-win situation. They would benefit and grow from it. As long as they gained something through the platform, they would publicize it with their like-minded classmates. Of course, they would also take the upper-class route. The Xinda Translation Company would choose some universities to cooperate with and provide them with a practical platform in exchange for their official recommendation. It could be said that the campus promotion route was very correct, and the results were very fast. However, there was also a shortcoming. The base number of translators was very large, but the proportion of elites was too low. After all, most of the students in the university were still beginners. The real experts, most of the gold-level translators, were still in their translation companies, and the translation companies were also eyeing them covetously from the side. Xinda Translation Company was a newcomer. Unlike in Guangdong province, they were the top company, and no other company could shake their position. Therefore, they could only turn a blind eye to the part-time work of their translators. In other provinces, Xinda Translation Company did not dare to openly recruit experts from other companies. This method of attracting hatred could easily cause other companies to form an alliance to encircle and suppress Xinda. Xinda's campus promotion route had won the future, and the situation was definitely getting better and better. But now it was lacking. Doesn't that mean that we have to temporarily give up the high-end translation market? Poplar Fruit frowned and asked, I'm worried that if we give up now, we won't be able to get it back in the future. I'm afraid that we will fall into an endless cycle. When the time comes, those people who have been trained on our platform will jump to other companies. Won't we be making a wedding dress for others? That's indeed the case. Yao Dehua laughed, but Poplar Fruit could not see any hint of anxiety in his expression. On second thought, if he could think of it, Yao Dehua must have thought of it too. If he was not anxious, it meant that he had a solution. Therefore, Poplar Fruit was relieved and looked at Yao Dehua, waiting for his explanation. We can't rush to break this situation. Yao Dehua laughed and said, First of all, we have been recruiting talents. Many of the teachers in the university often work part-time, and we have added some fresh recruits among them. We are also slowly getting in touch with other companies. Even if we don't have the opportunity, we have to fight for it. Of course, this process is relatively long. Most importantly, Yao Dehua said seriously, we have to form a training system. If we don't want to be controlled by others, we have to cultivate talents that belong to our company. Poplar Fruit nodded in agreement, but he shook his head and said, This is a good idea, but distant water can't quench the immediate thirst. Cultivating translators is a very long process. You see, the university takes 4 to 6 years to train a new batch of translators. Can we wait that long? Yao Dehua smiled slyly and said, We don't have to wait that long. Poplar Fruit looked at him, puzzled. Our company now has more than 200,000 registered interpreters. Almost all of them are students. Among them, there are freshmen and seniors, master students, and all kinds of levels. Our training only needs to target about 10,000 of the most promising and capable students. As long as 1% of them can pass the training and achieve a breakthrough in a short period of time, we will have enough silver and gold translators to conquer the high-end translation market, Yao Dehua said. Poplar Fruit's eyes lit up. He understood what Yao Dehua meant. Just like in university, recruiting a graduate student for a master's degree and recruiting a freshman student for a master's degree were 2 different levels. The former could join the research team immediately with a little training, while the latter had to learn slowly from the beginning. Among the 200,000 people, there would definitely be 100 or 200 who were capable and had a strong learning ability. It was only a matter of time and experience for them to become gold translators. Training could make up for this shortcoming. Of course, this training is not just for the urgent needs. Yao Dehua said, In the future, we will form a stable and long-term training system to give all the qualified translators a chance to grow. This will also be a reward to encourage their growth. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, Brother Yao, your idea is great. No matter what happens now, the company has won the future. Yao Dehua waved his hand and smiled. We have to have a future. Living in the present is more important. Unfortunately, our foundation is still not enough. We can only take it step by step. It's already very good. It's impossible to take over the entire national market in one bite, Poplar Fruit said. Yao Dehua and Poplar Fruit drank tea and chatted. He knew about Poplar Fruit's master's degree, but today, through Poplar Fruit, he found out about the situation of his master's degree. Yao Dehua gave a thumbs up and said to Poplar Fruit, I've heard about your dean. He's a great person. I didn't expect him to be so bold. Kiki was in her father's arms, looking at the exquisite snacks on the table. She looked up and saw Yao Dehua's thumbs up. She was happy. Hey, I know this. Chi-Chi waved her little hand and gave him a big thumbs up. She giggled and said, You're awesome. Huh? Yao Dehua laughed. Their conversation was interrupted by Kiki. Poplar Fruit patted Kiki's head and explained to Yao Dehua with a smile, I have a friend who often praises her. She learned it too. Poplar Fruit was referring to Fong Bei. When taking care of Kiki, Fong Bei was much more patient than Poplar Fruit. She was always smiling. Poplar Fruit would sometimes scold Kiki with a straight face and point out where she was wrong. Fong Bei would teach her how to do it. If she did it right, she would be praised and even rewarded. Education with praise was more effective than education with a stick. When Kiki was with Fong Beibei, she grew more than when she was with her father. Now Kiki spoke much more smoothly. This was all thanks to Fong Beibei's patient education. When they were almost done with their breakfast, Yao Dehua said to Poplar Fruit seriously, "Poplar Fruit, I won't beat around the bush with you. This time, I asked you to come out for a serious matter." Poplar Fruit also guessed it. He looked at Yao Dehua and listened patiently. Yao Dehua said, "Last year, I invited you, but you declined. But today, the company has developed to this point, and I still want you to come to the company to be the deputy general manager of the interpreter department." Poplar Fruit opened his mouth, but Yao Dehua waved his hand to stop Poplar Fruit from speaking. He continued, "I know that your ambition is not here. A serious job is not realistic for you. You have a child, and you have other things to do. The reason why I want to bring up this matter today is that the company really needs talents like you." It turned out that after Yao Dehua expanded his business, there were competitors eyeing him covetously. Internally, there were also some management problems. The main problem was the conflict between the old employees and the new employees. The old employees were more qualified, and the new employees were more capable. When each of them had their own ideas, they would fight fiercely. In the English department, it was still okay. A few of the old managers who used to be interpreters were not bad. What they said was convincing, but in the small language teams, there were a few arrogant newcomers who did not care about the managers whose language skills were indeed not good enough. Therefore, Yao Dehua needed Poplar Fruit, who was outstanding in all kinds of languages, to act as a stabilizing force. Of course, it was far more than that. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 186. Yao Dehua saw Poplar Fruit's hesitation. He smiled and said, "Don't be in a hurry to refuse. Listen to my conditions first. First of all, your job." Yao Dehua took a sip of tea and said, "You don't have to come to work, and you don't have to do any reports. There will be a few days of meetings at the end of each season. You will need to attend at that time. You and Mr. Liu will preside over the minority language team's meetings and help Mr. Liu control those hotheads who think they are the best in the world." Of course, that's not all. You heard the training system I just mentioned. If the company wants to develop for a long time, we must continue to cultivate our own talents. Aren't you going to be a lecturer at Higashiyama University? I want you to participate in the company's training program. When you are free, come and give 2 lessons to our seed interpreters." Yao Dehua said with a smile, "You're different from others. The company gives you the greatest freedom in terms of time. We will not use too many administrative and managerial matters to affect your energy and life." Poplar Fruit understood that Yao Dehua wanted to tie Poplar Fruit to his war chariot. Just like the position of deputy general manager, it was not a job at all. He almost did not need to do anything. It was a bit like the so-called honorary chairman or honorary president. However, Poplar Fruit did not feel disgusted. He had a deep friendship with Sina Translation Company and Yao Dehua. Yao Dehua definitely did not intend to use him to speak up for him when he was questioned by the whole world. This was especially strong when Poplar Fruit heard the benefits Yao Dehua gave him. "Next, it's your treatment." Yao Dehua hesitated and said, "I will not give you a salary. Whether it's monthly salary or annual salary, I will not give you a single cent." Poplar Fruit was stunned. "I will give you 5% of the shares." Yao Dehua said seriously. Poplar Fruit could not close his mouth. The shares only had dividends. Poplar Fruit knew that, but 5% was still a lot. Before Sina Translation Company left Guangdong Province, its assets were valued at 500 million. Now, it was definitely worth more than 1 billion. Assuming that the company's annual bonus was 20 million yuan, 20%, Poplar Fruit could earn 1 million yuan a year without doing anything. Of course, according to the current development of Sina Translation Company, the bonus of 20 million would only be more, not less. It could be seen how sincere Yao Dehua was. "I'm not paying you a salary because there's a system in the company. If you don't work when you're paid, others will definitely have an opinion about it." Yao Dehua smiled as he explained, "It's better to give you dividends." Of course, it was appropriate. First of all, The bonus money was much higher than the salary offered in the previous invitation. Secondly, if Poplar Fruit could do his best to help the company develop further, he would also gain more. Yao Dehua really wanted Poplar Fruit to make a career with him. No, it should be called a great career. Poplar Fruit stared at Yao Dehua for a long time. Yao Dehua was not in a hurry. He slowly drank his tea and waited for Poplar Fruit's reply. Poplar Fruit suddenly smiled bitterly, and then smiled with relief. He said, "Big brother Yao, if I don't agree, then it would be pretentious. Well, since Big Brother Yao thinks so highly of me, I will do it with Big Brother Yao." Although Yao Dehua looked calm, he was still very anxious. When he heard Poplar Fruit agree, his face immediately changed into a smile. He patted the table and said boldly, "Good, great. With us brothers working together, Xindao will one day reach the top of the country." He was not exaggerating. He had always had high hopes for Poplar Fruit, and Poplar Fruit's progress in less than a year had already confirmed his previous guess. With such a person who was destined to become a master, the company's future would be guaranteed. Paying a little bit of current benefits in exchange for future glory, this choice was worth it. Today's chat over breakfast was a preliminary agreement. The signing of the real contract would take place at another time. Before leaving, Yao Dehua put his hand on Poplar Fruit's shoulder and said with a smile, "If you have time, don't stay at home. Come to the company and find me. We brothers are going to conquer the world side by side." After saying goodbye to Yao Dehua, Poplar Fruit drove away in the Land Rover. Today, Poplar Fruit did not plan to go back too early. He had prepared picnic kits in the trunk. Taking advantage of the beautiful spring weather and the gentle breeze, it was best to take Kiki for a ride. When he drove to the Fanyu district, the continuous green mountains outside the car window passed by, embracing each other, and the rare blue sky and white clouds in the city. "Kiki, do you look good?" Poplar Fruit gently looked at Kiki in the passenger seat. Today, he installed Kiki's baby seat on the passenger seat, so Kiki's view was much wider. Whether it was the front window or the window on the right door, the magnificent and beautiful scenery made Kiki overwhelmed. Hearing her father call her name, Kiki tilted her head and looked at her father. She opened her mouth and laughed, revealing a few white teeth. Poplar Fruit stretched out his long hand and touched her little head. Kiki's hair was longer, and it felt a little thick. However, it was still so soft and comfortable. When they arrived at Dr. Mountain, this mountain peak was more than 200 meters above sea level. It was surrounded by mountains, and there were also ponds and artificial lakes scattered all around. There were mountains and rivers, which formed a beautiful scenery of overlapping mountain peaks and reflecting the reflection of the lake. There were many ingenious pavilions in the park, but these were not the purpose of Poplar Fruit today. He came to a lake and stopped the car. He first laid the camping cushion on the lush green grass, and then he carried Kiki down. "Sit down and don't move." Poplar Fruit pointed at Kiki on the cushion and smiled. He went back to the car and took the picnic box, then walked back to the cushion and put it down. Kiki didn't pay attention to her father. Her attention was attracted by a small flower blooming beside the cushion. Perhaps it was because the figure of the mountain blocked the direct sunlight, but the small flower was sparkling with sparkling dewdrops. It was extremely beautiful. Kiki lay on the edge of the cushion and observed the small flower with rapt attention. A light breeze blew, and a few strands of Kiki's hair danced with the small flower in the wind. The sound of branches and leaves rustling could be heard in the forest, as if they were cheering for this small dance. Poplar Fruit took out bags of delicious food from the box. Poplar Fruit didn't plan to go through too much trouble when he came out with his child, so he only brought some snacks and sandwiches. "Kiki." Poplar Fruit carried Kiki over and fed her porridge. There was porridge in the thermos flask, so it was still warm. "Drink the milk," Kiki said unhappily. "Drink the porridge first, then drink the milk later," Poplar Fruit advised. After eating and drinking, Poplar Fruit bent down, held Kiki's little hand, and taught her how to walk on the soft grass. Although Poplar Fruit's height needed to press his body very low, hearing Kiki's cheerful laughter echoing in the valley, a little soreness was nothing. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 187. By the time they got back, the sun had already set. The clouds in the sky were dyed red, as if a painter had accidentally spilled paint. After parking the car, Poplar Fruit carried the sleepy Kiki in one hand and the picnic bag in the other as they walked towards the apartment. As soon as they got out of the elevator, Poplar Fruit saw that the door to his apartment was wide open. The lights were still on inside, and so was Song Ji-win's. Didn't Song Ji-win go home today? Poplar Fruit frowned. This morning, Song Ji-win clearly told him that he would go home at night. However, he also had to go out today, so he didn't lend him the car. Was it a burglar? Poplar Fruit wasn't afraid if he was alone, but now that Kiki was in his arms, he couldn't be careless. Thus, Poplar Fruit put Kiki in his left hand and held the box in his right hand in front of him as he slowly moved towards the door. Ha! Before he entered the door, Su Jinfeng's loud voice reached Poplar Fruit's ears. Poplar Fruit breathed a sigh of relief, lowered his guard, and walked in. Lao Guo is back. Song Ji-win's eyes were sharp, and he immediately jumped up from the sofa. I'll help you clean up. Sit down. Godmother Lu Suqin's voice sounded. Song Ji-win withered again and sat down embarrassedly. Poplar Fruit then realized that Lu Suqin was also sitting on the sofa, leaning against his mother. Godmother, Mom, why are you here? Poplar Fruit put down the box and smiled. He turned around and realized that Song Ji-win's phone was on the coffee table in front of his godmother. Looking at Song Ji-win's expression, Poplar Fruit somewhat understood why Song Ji-win didn't inform him. The phone was already turned over, so how could he inform him? Such a big fuss? Poplar Fruit began to feel uneasy. If I didn't come, would you still be obedient? Su Jinfeng said unhappily. Your godmother told me that she arranged several blind dates for you, but you refused to go. Every time, you would make excuses. Wait a minute, let me carry Kiki back to the room first, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. He quickly carried Kiki back to the bedroom, put Kiki back in the crib, and covered her with a small blanket. Poplar Fruit finally understood. His mother came from his hometown without saying a word. Song Ji-win's phone was confiscated by his godmother. Song Ji-win was forced to open the door of his house and wait for him in the house. It was all because of those blind dates. Poplar Fruit was indeed tired of blind dates. Last year, his godmother arranged several blind dates for him, and each one was more arrogant than the other. They couldn't even compare to the first blind date with a foreign company girl who spoke English. Moreover, as long as Poplar Fruit revealed that he was a single father, they would all find an excuse to run away. This year, when he came back from the Spring Festival, Lu Suqin arranged another blind date for him under his mother's instigation. Poplar Fruit naturally didn't want to go. He used one excuse after another, saying that he didn't have time that day, that he didn't like this type of girl, and so on. Anyway, none of them went. Now, his mother couldn't stay at home and directly came to supervise. Just thinking about Poplar Fruit gave him a headache. No, he didn't even have time to have a headache. He didn't stay in the bedroom for long before his mother urged him to come out. Your attitude isn't right, Su Jinfeng criticized him. You can't deny blind dates just because of a few people. There's a saying that goes, cast the net wide, catch more fish. Our situation is special, so we have to try more. You stay at home all day and haven't seen a single woman. How are you going to find someone who's willing to spend the rest of their life with us? Aren't I busy? Poplar Fruit said with a bitter smile. How busy can you be? Su Jinfeng had long seen through Poplar Fruit's little trick. She said, I don't believe that you don't even have time to have a meal with a girl. Isn't there still Kiki? I have to look after her. Don't tell me that I'm going to bring Kiki to blind dates. Poplar Fruit quibbled. What I mean is Kiki is still young. Why don't we wait until she's a little older before we consider it? Don't use Kiki as an excuse, Lu Suqin said as she knocked on the table. Her finger just happened to knock on Song Ji-win's phone, causing Song Ji-win to grimace. Kiki won't have a problem. You go on a blind date, and I'll help you look after her. Otherwise, why do you need me? Su Jinfeng said. You still have to find a suitable one, Poplar Fruit said with a bitter smile. People will find out about Kiki's existence sooner or later. Every time you find someone for me, you hide it from them. When I mention Kiki on a blind date, They're not happy. You have to hide this kind of situation? Are you stupid? Just tell them directly? Su Jinfeng said with disappointment. It's not too late to talk about it after you've developed feelings for her. What's the point of that? If she's not willing, she definitely won't be willing in the future. Poplar Fruit said. He silently added in his heart, Xiao Ran was with me for 4 years. For years of such deep feelings, but she still couldn't accept Kiki. Is it enough to develop feelings for her after a few days? I don't care. You're going anyway. We'll talk about it later. Su Jinfeng said shamelessly. Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly. His mother had turned on her unreasonable mode. If you can't do it the first time, you can do it the second time. Godmother will help you find someone suitable. Lu Suqin said with a smile. That's right. Your godmother is helping you so much. If you don't go, won't you be letting your godmother down? Su Jinfeng said angrily. I'll cook for you guys first. Mom, godmother, you guys haven't eaten yet, right? Poplar Fruit tried to change the topic. What's the hurry? Let's make things clear first. Su Jinfeng said. We'll arrange a blind date for you. Are you going or not? I'm going. I'm definitely going. Poplar Fruit said resolutely. In order to stop them from nagging, Poplar Fruit decided to delay. However, he obviously did not notice that Song Jiwen, who was shaking his head desperately, was as quiet as a cicada in winter. That's good, Su Jinfeng said with satisfaction. She looked at Lu Suqin and asked, Suqin, where does the girl you mentioned work? Lu Suqin smiled and said, that girl has a good job. After graduating this year, she entered the provincial hospital as a nurse. Her job is stable, and she's also pretty. Then what are we waiting for? Hurry up and arrange a meeting with Poplar Fruit tomorrow. Such a good target. If we're slow, she won't be ours. Su Jinfeng said as she pushed Lu Suqin. Tomorrow? Poplar Fruit's head dripped with cold sweat. So fast. How was this a delaying tactic? It was simply digging a hole to bury himself. Isn't it too rushed? No need to rush. The good girl won't wait for you there, Su Jinfeng said with a smile. Tomorrow, Mom will also take a look from afar. Isn't everything about coming and going? Poplar Fruit said with a bitter smile. Love depends on fate. If it's not suitable, there's no use in rushing. Are you looking for an excuse to not go again? Su Jinfeng said as she stared at Poplar Fruit. No. Poplar Fruit quickly shook his hand and said. Duan Xueqing saw Poplar Fruit's car coming back from the balcony. She waited for a while and estimated that Poplar Fruit should be back. Then, she went up to find Poplar Fruit to eat together. However, when she walked to the open door, she heard Su Jinfeng's voice. She arranged a few blind dates for you, but you refused all of them. Every time, you would make excuses. Duan Xueqing retracted her left leg. She eavesdropped behind the door for a while before she understood what was going on. Duan Xueqing bit her lower lip and looked at her clothes. Then, she turned around and went home. After a while, she came out of the elevator again. This time, she was wearing a loose t-shirt and a pair of hot pants. The t-shirt covered most of the hot pants, and her long legs were exposed to the air, which was even more tempting. When she arrived at Poplar Fruit's door, she heard Poplar Fruit's mother ask Poplar Fruit, Are you looking for an excuse to not go again? Then, Poplar Fruit replied, No. Her legs were a little weak, but Duan Xueqing encouraged herself in her heart and walked in. Poplar Fruit was chatting with his mother and godmother when he noticed that they were looking at the door in surprise. Song Jiwen also had a strange look on his face. Poplar Fruit turned his head and saw that it was actually Duan Xueqing. Madam, why are you involved? Poplar Fruit laughed bitterly in his heart. He stared blankly as Duan Xueqing walked in slowly. She walked to his side and squeezed him to sit down on the sofa. Duan Xueqing had one hand behind her. She quietly pulled Poplar Fruit's right hand over and wrapped it around her waist. Her heart was pounding when she made such an outrageous move. If it weren't for the fact that she was used to being expressionless, her face would definitely be flushed red right now. Poplar Fruit almost went limp in his arms. His right hand rested on Duan Xueqing's soft and slender waist. His thighs were pressed against Duan Shueching's without any obstruction. His nose was filled with the faint fragrance of Duan Shueching's hair. Poplar Fruit felt like he was going to have a nosebleed. He quickly chanted, "Color separation is emptiness. Emptiness separation is color separation." Song Jiwen knew about the relationship between Poplar Fruit and Duan Shueching, but right now, he could only stare blankly at the bashful Duan Shueching being held in Poplar Fruit's arms. What's going on? The same question mark floated in Su Jinfeng and Lu Suqin's minds. Moreover, they kept copying and pasting, stuffing their minds in a mess. Just a moment ago, they were talking to Poplar Fruit about the blind date. How did a girl immediately throw herself into Poplar Fruit's arms? Logically speaking, Song Jiwen's phone had been confiscated. It was impossible for him to report it, and Poplar Fruit also didn't have time to make any arrangements. The girl in front of them was very beautiful. She was so beautiful that it made people feel that she was unattainable. That waist-length hair, that exquisite appearance, that figure, and that height made people feel that this girl should have been from the heavens. She should have been hidden in a duke's mansion. How could she have fallen into the mortal world? But this kind of beauty had quietly walked in. She was like a dream. Moreover, she was leaning against Poplar Fruit. Especially when they saw Poplar Fruit's hands around her slender waist, a kind of unreal feeling arose spontaneously. What was going on? Could it be that they were daydreaming? Chapter 188. The air in the room seemed to have frozen. No one made a sound as they stared at each other. Even Song Jiwen, who had always been the most eloquent, kept his mouth shut. He only muttered in his heart, "What's going on? What's going on? It's none of my business. It's none of my business." Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment. He could roughly guess what Duan Shueching's actions meant. However, due to his understanding of Duan Shueching's personality, he didn't trust his own judgment. Thus, he opened his mouth but didn't make a sound in the end. "Hello, Annie." Duan Shueching's voice was as soft as a mosquito's. She had been eavesdropping outside for a while and knew that Su Jinfeng was Poplar Fruit's mother. Thus, she greeted Su Jinfeng while looking at her. Okay. Su Jinfeng's reaction was a beat slower, but she still responded very enthusiastically. Such a beautiful girl suddenly appeared, and even went into her son's arms. Su Jinfeng was a little unsure. In terms of appearance, Su Jinfeng had seen Poplar Fruit's ex-girlfriend, Lu Yinran, before. She definitely couldn't compare to half of this girl in front of her. However, such a beautiful girl was with her son. Su Jinfeng knew her family situation. They didn't have money or people, and they even had a burden. How was it possible for such a beautiful girl to be willing to throw herself at them? Su Jinfeng glared at Poplar Fruit, indicating for him to quickly explain and introduce her. Poplar Fruit was glared at by his mother. He raised his hand to scratch his head and said, "Mom, this is Duan Shueching. Shueching, this is my mother. This is Mosquito's mother." When Poplar Fruit lowered his hand from scratching his head, it paused slightly on Duan Shueching's shoulder. Then, he placed it on her waist. Even though he had only placed it gently on top, the Poplar Fruit could still clearly feel the softness and delicateness of Duan Shueching. The heat in her heart was transmitted to her palms. Through the thin fabric, Duan Shueching could feel the warmth of Yanggua's palms. It was as if ants were crawling on her heart. Waves of stimulation traveled from her waist to her head, causing Duan Shueching's face to turn red. In Su Jinfeng's eyes, it was the shy look of a daughter-in-law meeting her mother-in-law for the first time. Even though she didn't understand how things changed so quickly, she still felt a little happy in her heart. Lu Suqin was the first to speak. She looked at Poplar Fruit and said with some blame, "Fruit, why didn't you tell me that you have a girlfriend? No wonder you're making all sorts of excuses. If you had told us earlier, we wouldn't have had to blindly point you out. This isn't." The appearance of Duan Shueching made Poplar Fruit a little dizzy. He hurriedly tried to explain. "I didn't let Poplar Fruit say it." Duan Shueching pinched Poplar Fruit to stop him from continuing. Then she stammered, "We just had sex, so..." Duan Shueching was very bad at lying. As she spoke, she didn't know how to continue. However, Poplar Fruits and Song Ji-win's mother's imaginations had already filled in the rest of the words. Su Jin-fong smiled and said, "What's there to be embarrassed about? We're not big tigers." "Ji-win, you know about it too?" Lu Suqin glanced at Song Ji-win, who was quietly hiding at the side, and asked lightly. It was obvious that she was dissatisfied with such an incompetent intelligence agent like him. Song Ji-win didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This time, he was really unjustly implicated. However, he still had to help Poplar Fruit with this lie. He lowered his eyes and said submissively, "Mom, I wanted to tell you for a long time, but Poplar Fruit didn't let me. Did you know? He even threatened me that if I said it, he would cut off all ties as brothers." Song Ji-win would never admit that he was trying to divert the hatred. This matter was clearly caused by Poplar Fruit. "Hurry up and deal with it yourself." Poplar Fruit's eyes flickered with confusion. After hesitating for a while, he still said against his will, "Mom, Godmother, you've all seen it, so I won't hide it from you. That's right, I'm dating Xueqing now. You've also seen that Xueqing is very shy. I'm also worried that you'll scare her if you know." No, Su Jinfeng said happily. "We can't wait to be happy. How could we scare Xueqing?" To be honest, Su Jinfeng was still a little worried because the girl in front of her looked too outstanding. She didn't know what her son relied on to charm the girl, but it was a good thing that her son had a girlfriend. Didn't this solve the problem that she had been worrying about? The more Su Jinfeng looked at Duan Xueqing, the more satisfied she was. Meanwhile, Duan Xueqing's heart was thumping from Su Jinfeng's gaze. She placed her left hand in Poplar Fruit's left palm and interlocked their fingers. Only when her entire palm was in Poplar Fruit's moist and warm palm did she feel slightly at ease. It seemed like this was the position she had been looking forward to the most, being held in Poplar Fruit's embrace and then placing her small hand in his big hand. It was warm and full of happiness. It was a pity that they were surrounded by people. If it was a rooftop or a mountaintop, how happy would it be to look at the starry sky together? Of course, Su Jinfeng wasn't satisfied with this little bit of information. She began to speculate. "Xueqing, where is your home? Judging from your accent, you don't seem to be from Cantonese. Are you from Cantonese?" Duan Xueqing didn't dare to raise her head and asked. "Xueqing is from Jiangnan." Poplar Fruit explained for her. "Oh, then you came to Cantonese to work here?" Su Jinfeng continued to ask. "She's a civil servant." Song Jiwin shouted. He finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Seeing that everything was calm, he interrupted. "Eat your biscuits." Lu Suqin threw some snacks on the coffee table to Song Jiwin, not allowing him to interrupt again. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Xueqing is also from my school, and we have the same major. She's just 1 year younger than me. She graduated and is working in a street office nearby." Oh, that's good, that's good. Su Jinfeng was overjoyed and couldn't stop smiling. Poplar Fruit secretly rolled his eyes. His mother's generation had a deep-rooted ideology of being an official. They always felt that civil servants were good. "Annie came today?" Duan Xueqing gathered her courage and asked. "Yeah, Poplar Fruit didn't tell me about you before, right?" As his mother, "I've been worried all day, so I ran over to arrange a blind date for him." Su Jinfeng said, "Why do you need a blind date?" Lu Suqin observed her expression and said with a smile, "He already has such a beautiful girlfriend, so why would he need a blind date? But it's good that you came this time. If you didn't come, I really wouldn't know that Poplar Fruit is so capable to secretly hide a beauty at home." Duan Xueqing shyly lowered her head and said softly, "She's not a beauty anymore." That's good, that's good." Su Jinfeng was so happy that she was incoherent. No need to arrange anything. Reject all of them. Reject all of them. Everyone, use your votes to smash the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 189. From tomorrow onwards, 3 p.m. For the time being, how long will it last depends on. After chatting for a while, Poplar Fruit was asked to go to the kitchen to prepare dinner, and Song Jiwin was also asked to help. Gold, who had long been annoyed by a group of strangers, did not dare to bark when Song Jiwen and Poplar Fruit were there. It also wagged its tail and followed in. Song Jiwen took a piece of dog food from Poplar Fruit, stuffed it in a gold's mouth, and ordered it to obediently squat aside and not move. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "Gold won't move." I don't know who it learned from, but it's very misophobic. It's not like other dogs, who like to rummage through the trash can. When it comes back from outside, it has to take a bath. Song Jiwen ignored Poplar Fruit's words. He looked at the three women in the living room, turned around, pointed his right finger at Poplar Fruit, and said, "You found a shield?" He also pursed his lips. Poplar Fruit shook his head with a wry smile and said, "I didn't have time to find a shield. How would I know that my mother would suddenly appear? You didn't tell me secretly. You also saw that my phone was controlled by my mother when I got home. How could I tell her?" Song Jiwen helped Poplar Fruit peel the leaves and said. Poplar Fruit shook his head. "So, she came here to be your shield?" Song Jiwen asked. Poplar Fruit nodded. "What did I say?" Song Jiwen elbowed Poplar Fruit and said, "Duan Xueqing is interested in you, right? Don't talk nonsense." Poplar Fruit said this sentence without confidence. Song Jiwen pursed his lips. He didn't want to argue with this guy who refused to admit it even if he was beaten to death. While they were cooking, the atmosphere in the living room was really harmonious, and they were chatting happily. Of course, most of the time, it was Su Jinfeng who was talking, and Lu Suqin who added. Duan Xueqing covered her mouth and laughed secretly. Poplar Fruit walked out of the kitchen with the soup. Seeing them laughing, he asked curiously, "What are you talking about? Tell me about your childhood." Su Jinfeng smiled. Duan Xueqing laughed so hard that her face was bright red. She looked at Poplar Fruit with a teasing look in her eyes. Poplar Fruit glanced at it, and a lot of black lines appeared on his forehead. He was a little speechless as he said to Su Jinfeng, "Mom, are you talking about my scandals again?" In the past, when he brought Lu Yunran home, Su Jinfeng would drag her to talk about Poplar Fruit's scandals. She even showed Lu Yunran photos of Poplar Fruit when he was young. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "What scandals? What scandals?" Song Jiwen, who had been listening to the sounds in the living room, jumped out and shouted, "Hurry up and tell me." Lu Suqin tried hard to hold back her laughter and said, "It's when Poplar Fruit was 5 years old. It was very funny. I can't continue." Jinfeng, you tell him. Song Jiwen saw that his mother couldn't help laughing halfway through the story, and his heart itched even more. At that time, Su Jinfeng first laughed loudly. When Poplar Fruit held his forehead, she began to tell the story. When Poplar Fruit was 5 years old, there was a festival when he went with Yang Tai and Su Jinfeng to their youngest uncle's house for a gathering. Poplar Fruit was the oldest child in the family at that time. He often took his younger brother, Xiao Er, to run around like crazy. Xiao Er was another uncle's child, but he often stayed at their youngest uncle's house and was taken care of by their grandmother. On the first day of their arrival, little Poplar Fruit took his younger brother upstairs to play. Their youngest uncle was taking a shower in the bathroom. Little Poplar Fruit felt the urge to pee, so he directly opened the door. The bathroom door was broken and couldn't be closed properly. Amidst their youngest uncle's exclamations, he slowly pulled down his pants and went to the toilet. Xiao Er foolishly followed behind, glancing at their youngest uncle who was still covered in soap. This wasn't a big deal, but the next day, their youngest uncle went upstairs to take a shower again. Little Poplar Fruit took his younger brother and slowly climbed the stairs behind him. Little Poplar Fruit and Xiao Er, these two naughty children, made their youngest uncle a little nervous. He ran upstairs and closed the door. Little Poplar Fruit didn't give up. He pushed and knocked on the door outside, shouting himself hoarse. However, their youngest uncle was indifferent and didn't open the door for him. Little Poplar Fruit felt wronged. He pulled his muddle-headed younger brother downstairs and ran to the adults who were playing mahjong. Little Poplar Fruit couldn't remember if he was crying or not. Anyway, there were 2 lines of clear tears hanging down his face. He ran to the adults, pulled on their sleeves, and sobbed as he told them. Su Jinfeng acted vividly. She imitated Little Poplar Fruit's tone perfectly. "Youngest uncle, he closed the door and didn't let me go upstairs. He's taking a shower inside. Can't he just close the door? I went upstairs just to watch TV. I didn't want to see his little birds. Why did he close the door? He ignored me and didn't open the door. Boo-hoo. When little brother was bathing, he was looking at little brother's little birdie. Su Jinfeng showed little Yang's expression of being wronged to the point that she couldn't say a word. Duan Xueqing, who had already laughed once, couldn't help but laugh again. Song Jiwen hadn't heard of Poplar Fruit's dark history before. This time, he laughed even harder. He patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder and said with a smile, "Old Gua, I didn't expect you to be so funny. I'm dying of laughter. I didn't want to see his little birds." Poplar Fruit tried his best to hold back. He didn't throw Song Jiwen, this bad friend, over his shoulder. The past was unbearable to recall. Poplar Fruit was already used to his boring mother bringing it up again and again. There were still a lot of scandals. Poplar Fruit sighed in his heart. Although there was nothing between him and Duan Xueqing, if his mother went on like this, could they still be friends in the future? After chatting with him for a while, Poplar Fruit hurried back to the kitchen. He had to finish the remaining 2 dishes as soon as possible. Otherwise, his mother would reveal even more dirt on him. Song Jiwen, this bastard, actually used the excuse that he was all ears and didn't come back to help. Forget it, let's not talk about him. It's just tearing up. Time to eat. Poplar Fruit knocked on the table and said as he brought the bowls and chopsticks over. Poplar Fruit doesn't have any other strong points. Only this dish is good, Su Jinfeng said to Duan Xueqing with a smile as she pointed at the dishes on the table. Duan Xueqing nodded seriously. Poplar Fruit covered his forehead again. He wanted to cry, but had no tears. He complained in his heart, "Mom, is this how you praise your son?" During the meal, Su Jinfeng didn't stay idle. She picked up a lot of food for Duan Xueqing and said, "Little Qing, eat more. Look at how skinny you are." Poplar Fruit tugged at her and said, "Mom, Xueqing doesn't eat so much meat. You picked up so much for her. It's too greasy." Duan Xueqing didn't throw it away. She bit the bullet and ate a few mouthfuls of pork belly. After eating one, she couldn't eat any more. She looked at Poplar Fruit anxiously. Seeing this, Su Jinfeng said with a smile, "If you don't like it, then eat less. Little Qing, give all the fatty meat to Poplar Fruit." Duan Xueqing obediently placed all the braised pork belly in her bowl into Poplar Fruit's bowl. This action was so practiced that it was like eating a common meal. Seeing this, Su Jinfeng nodded secretly. Poplar Fruit was a blockhead. He shoved the meat into his mouth and took a big mouthful of rice. He ate very happily and didn't care that it was secondhand meat. Later, "I'll stay at your godmother's place." Su Jinfeng looked kindly at Poplar Fruit and said, "Why don't you stay at home? It's not like you don't have a bed." Poplar Fruit was confused and asked curiously, "It's not convenient for Mom to stay here." Su Jinfeng said, "I didn't know about Little Qing, so I brought things over." Only then did Poplar Fruit understand what his mother meant by inconvenient. He smiled bitterly and said, "Mom, don't run around. Just stay at home. Xueqing has her own house downstairs. It's not like she's staying at my place." Duan Xueqing also understood at this time. Her ears immediately turned red. She pretended to bury herself in the bowl and didn't raise her head. "Oh!" Su Jinfeng turned to look at Poplar Fruit, then looked at Duan Xueqing, and then looked at Poplar Fruit's bedroom. She didn't say anything. Halfway through the meal, Kiki started crying in the room. His precious daughter had woken up. Poplar Fruit quickly threw everything aside and carried her out of the bedroom. "Kiki, look, who's here today?" Poplar Fruit hugged his daughter and coaxed her while teasing her to divert her attention. Kiki was still angry from being woken up. Hearing her father's words, she held back her tears and looked at Su Jinfeng. She choked and said, "Grandma." Then she turned her head and hugged her father's neck to continue crying. Su Jinfeng wiped her hands and wanted to take her granddaughter, but Poplar Fruit waved at her. In Kiki's state, it was best to let her father coax her, or she would cry nonstop. After the meal, everyone dispersed. Duan Xueqing also went back. However, although it was only a few steps, Poplar Fruit was still sent to send Duan Shueching home. Poplar Fruit sent Duan Shueching into the house and said to her with a smile, "Thank you so much for today. Otherwise, I would have to listen to their orders and go on a blind date tomorrow." Duan Shueching held the door and looked up at Poplar Fruit's face through the bright light in the living room. She said softly, "Your mother is a good person." Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "As long as I didn't bring you any trouble today. Then, I'll go back first. You have a good rest." Duan Shueching stood at the door and watched Poplar Fruit get into the elevator. Only then did she close the door with a sweet smile. Back home, Poplar Fruit took care of bathing and feeding Kiki. Su Jinfeng helped to clean up the dishes and wash Kiki's clothes. It wasn't until Kiki went back to sleep that Su Jinfeng had time to sit down and talk with her son. "How far have you gone with that girl?" Su Jinfeng asked. "What do you mean?" Poplar Fruit didn't understand. "That is..." Su Jinfeng clenched her fists together and then moved her two thumbs together. "Hey, Mom," Poplar Fruit said with a bit of blame. "Why are you asking this?" "Yes or no?" Su Jinfeng asked relentlessly. "Of course not," Poplar Fruit said. "Then why don't you hurry up?" Su Jinfeng said resentfully. "Our family situation is special. If you don't do it as soon as possible, the cooked duck will fly away." "That's not how it works." Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, "When it comes to love, it has to be a matter of mutual affection. When the conditions are right, success will come naturally. It can't be forced." "Forget it. I'm ignoring you. Such a beautiful girl. Don't regret it in the future." Su Jinfeng saw that Poplar Fruit was stubborn and simply didn't care anymore. Didn't Poplar Fruit's father say that the children and grandchildren have their own fortune? Let's see what Poplar Fruit can do. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 190. The next day, his mother returned home in satisfaction. Poplar Fruit hoped that his mother could stay in Guangzhou for a few more days, but she insisted on going back because she was worried about her grandson. Poplar Fruit knew that his mother just wanted to leave more space for Poplar Fruit and Duan Shueching. Poplar Fruit drove his mother to the train. Along the way, Su Jinfeng hugged Kiki lovingly and said, "When you come home next time, Kiki will probably be running all over the place. She can almost walk on her own now. Your granddaughter is really smart." Poplar Fruit smiled. Su Jinfeng said, "Fruit, you must remember that when Kiki turns 1, no matter how busy you are, you must make a trip home." Poplar Fruit's hometown had the custom of celebrating a child's birthday when they turn 1. On that day, they would hold a banquet and invite friends and relatives. Poplar Fruit still remembered that when he was young, he always looked forward to other people's children celebrating their first birthday. That way, he could join in the fun and eat for free. "I will remember. It's at the end of next month," Poplar Fruit replied with a smile. After sending his mother to the train, Poplar Fruit looked at his mother's back view, which had become thinner. He didn't feel good about it. Recently, his mother had been worrying too much about his life. In the end, it was his fault. In the future, he would have to perform better and not let his parents worry about him anymore. "Hurry up and earn money to buy a house. After that, I will bring my parents to Guangzhou to enjoy a comfortable life," Poplar Fruit reminded himself in his heart. Poplar Fruit received a call from Zheng Yujie. Zheng Yujie told him that his passport had been prepared and that he had also contacted overseas to prepare to leave at the end of the month. "Are you coming to Beijing to fly to America with us?" Zheng Yujie smiled. "Do you want me to buy you a plane ticket?" Poplar Fruit wouldn't be polite to Zheng Yujie now. He smiled and said, "Okay, you can book the ticket and tell me when to leave. I can leave at any time." "Then why don't you come over now?" Zheng Yujie said mischievously. "That won't do. I'm very busy." Poplar Fruit chuckled. "TSK, you only know how to lie to me. It's not like I don't know that you're very busy taking care of the child," Zheng Yujie said as she lay on her back on the bed with one foot propped up high. She looked at her clean and flawless foot and said, "Hey, Kiki, don't step on Gold's tail." Poplar Fruit suddenly shouted. He hurriedly said into the phone, "Let's talk about it next time. I have to deal with something here." All right, bye-bye. Zheng Yujie stared blankly at the busy tone coming from the phone. She pouted her lips and placed the phone aside. She pulled a doll over and hugged it as she rolled on the bed. She then covered her face and thought happily, going overseas with poplar fruit. Oh, that's great. At this moment, poplar fruit pulled up Kiki, who had fallen on the carpet. Earlier on, Kiki purposely stepped on Gold's tail. Angered, Gold turned around and poked Kiki. Kiki, who was standing unsteadily, suddenly lost her balance and fell to the ground. Chi-Chi felt a little wronged and wanted to go up and hug Yang's neck, who was half kneeling and half squatting on the ground. She pretended to cry and pointed at Gold with one hand. Gold also felt that it had done something wrong. Its ears drooped, and it lowered its head and lay on the ground. It didn't even dare to move its tail. Poplar Fruit didn't hug Kiki as usual. Instead, he pushed away Kiki's little hand and said sternly, "Don't cry. Stand still." He patted the ground near the sofa and motioned Kiki to stand over there. Kiki felt even more wronged. She really sobbed this time. She crawled over unwillingly and stood up. She still wanted to find her father to lean on. Poplar Fruit helped Kiki up and didn't let her come over. He said with a straight face, "Stand up straight. Don't cry." Gold. Poplar Fruit didn't let go of Gold, who was trying to hide away silently. "You stand over there too." Gold looked in the direction of Poplar Fruit's finger and ran over to Poplar Fruit's side. It rubbed its head against Poplar Fruit's trousers. "Stand over there," Poplar Fruit ordered again. He knew that Gold could understand what he meant. This little one was born very smart. In the past, he only needed to demonstrate, and it could run to the bathroom to solve its physiological problems. Of course, because it was still small, it couldn't reach it. So every time it went to the bathroom, Poplar Fruit still had to flush it. Gold wagged its tail and stood over there. "All of you are acting pitiful in front of me." Poplar Fruit stood up and clasped his hands behind his back. He looked like a private school teacher at the beginning of the last century. However, for Kiki and the others, he was too tall. Poplar Fruit said a few words and felt that it was very inconvenient, so he squatted down again. "Do you all know that you are wrong?" Poplar Fruit asked. Kiki looked at her father, who had turned into a big devil and didn't dare to make a sound. Gold also lowered its head and looked up at Poplar Fruit, wagging its tail to please him. "You all don't know?" Poplar Fruit asked and answered his own question. "Then I'll tell you all about it. First, Kiki." Poplar Fruit patted Kiki's little shoulder gently. She shook, but didn't fall. "Gold is playing with you. Why did you step on its tail?" Poplar Fruit said. "Does Gold not feel pain? Think about it yourself. If someone stepped on your foot, wouldn't you be unhappy?" Kiki's head was a little confused. Her long eyelashes fluttered. She seemed to understand, but not understand. "Also, Gold, you." Poplar Fruit pointed at Gold and said, "Whether you are a dog or a dog, you can't use violence to curb violence. Kiki stepped on your foot. She is not sensible, but you are also not sensible? You want to push her and make her fall? You tell me, shouldn't you do that?" Gold innocently looked at Poplar Fruit. It didn't know what he was talking about and wagged its tail. "Just now I punished you to stand, because I want you to understand that it is wrong to do that. Kiki, Gold, friends should love each other and don't fight. Do you understand?" Poplar Fruit seriously asked. "If you understand, then nod your head." He said a lot of principles and didn't take Kiki and Gold's ability to accept into consideration. Of course, his actions weren't completely ineffective. At the very least, he was able to scare Chi-Chi and Goldie with a straight face. It had been a long time since she saw her father like this. Kiki also gradually stopped crying. She looked at her father with some grievance and obediently nodded her head. "That's a good girl." Poplar Fruit held Kiki in his arms and said with a smile, "Listen to your father's words. You are your father's good daughter." Kiki still felt wronged. She pouted her mouth and gently patted her father's chest. Poplar Fruit kissed Kiki's forehead and gently comforted her. "Okay, Dad won't say anymore." Kiki is very obedient. Gold wagged its tail and also leaned over. Poplar Fruit's left hand rubbed its small head. It was so comfortable that Gold closed its eyes. Chi-Chi struggled out of her father's arms and hugged Goldie. The two of them were like brothers in distress. After being reprimanded by Yanghua, the unpleasantness from before had vanished into thin air. Poplar Fruit looked at the two little ones playing together and smiled. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than or equal to that you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.